Hey there, tonight we're uncovering the bustling chaos of a medieval market town, where the truth is, the intoxicating aroma of spices mingles with the stench of open sewers, and what you're about to discover might have you clutching your nose in disbelief. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now get comfortable, perhaps dim the lights, or find that perfect pillow position, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in the thick of it as a chilly mist clings to the cobblestones of a medieval market town. The world around you is waking up, but let's be honest, it's a far cry from the leisurely brunch scene of today. The sun is barely peeking over the horizon, but the heartbeat of the town is already pounding. People are shouting, animals are bleeding, and the air is a heady mix of manure and freshly baked bread. Forget your morning coffee. This is an espresso shot of history, straight to the veins. Medieval market towns were the eBay of their day, minus the convenience of clicking add to cart. These towns were more than just clusters of huts and shops. They were meticulously planned chaos. Streets were laid out like tangled spaghetti, designed to squeeze as much commerce as possible into every nook and cranny. You'd have the High Street, where the town's most important businesses flaunted their wares, rubbing shoulders with the church, which was typically plonked right in the middle like a moral compass. Nearby, you'd find the market square, a pulsating hub of economic activity. By the crack of dawn, tradespeople are already bustling about. These folks aren't just early risers. They're practically nocturnal creatures. Bakers, for instance, have been up since midnight, kneading dough by the light of their flickering candles. The smell of their freshly baked bread is enough to make anyone consider converting to carb-based religion. Blacksmiths, meanwhile, are already hammering away, producing everything from horseshoes to weapons. They are the medieval equivalent of Amazon Prime, if Amazon Prime involved a lot more sweat and molten metal. Setting up a market stall wasn't just a matter of unpacking a van and erecting a gazebo. It was a complex operation that could rival a military campaign. Stalls had to be set up in the right order, with the right permits, and heaven forbid you encroach on someone else's agreed-upon patch. That could lead to a brawl that would make a bar fight look like a tea party. You'd also need to pay your stall fees, a quaint little medieval extortion method known as tolls. And these weren't just a few coins slipped under the table. They were official payments collected by the town's bailiff, who was as popular as a tax inspector at a holiday party. Now, let's talk taxes. Everyone loves those, right? In the medieval market, there were taxes for everything. Import taxes, export taxes, even a tax for the privilege of setting up shop. If you think modern taxation is a labyrinth, try navigating the medieval version without a GPS. Back then, you'd pay a toll called stallage, just for the privilege of selling your goods. In some towns, you might even pay scot and lard, a kind of all-in-one community fee that covered a myriad of town expenses. If you were a foreign merchant, you could expect additional tariffs, a lovely welcome gift from the town that said, "Thanks for coming, now hand over your cash." What about the goods themselves? The medieval market was a smorgasbord of the bizarre and the essential. You could buy everything from wool and flax to spices and fabrics, but let's not romanticize it too much. These weren't quaint little stands with artisanal organic produce. Your average market stall would more likely be piled high with rough woolen cloth, sacks of grain, and barrels of salted fish. Forget strawberries in winter. You'd be lucky to find a fresh apple that wasn't half worm. There's a myth that all medieval markets were picturesque scenes right out of a Renaissance painting. The reality, more Dickensian than Disney. Sure, there were the colorful cloths and exotic spices, but there were also live animals bleeding and squawking, a cacophony of haggling that could make Wall Street look like a meditation retreat, and enough mud to drown a small horse. The streets weren't paved with gold. They were lucky to be paved at all. Let's face it, hygiene standards were best described as aspirational. In the midst of this controlled pandemonium, you'd find the town crier, a kind of medieval Twitter feed, shouting out the latest news and proclamations. Because when you can't read, you rely on the booming voice of a guy with a bell to keep you informed. And it wasn't all doom and gloom. Sure, he'd announce tax hikes and regulations, but he'd also tell you about upcoming fairs and lost sheep. In a world without smartphones, he was your notification bar. So here you are, wandering through this chaotic tapestry of medieval life, dodging a cart laden with barrels, and trying not to step in something unsavory. You're witnessing an economic system that's both familiar and utterly alien, a place where commerce is king, but the crown sits on a very grubby head. It's a world that's as brutal as it is fascinating, and you haven't even had breakfast yet. Welcome to the medieval market town. You might want to watch your step. As the day unfolds, the market begins to buzz with an energy that's positively electric. The medieval market town isn't just waking up, it's exploding into life, a kaleidoscope of sights, sounds, and smells that would make Times Square look like a quiet library. But before you get too swept away by this romantic notion, remember, this isn't a scene from a fairy tale. It's more like a medieval version of a marsh pit, where the only thing you're crowd surfing on is a wave of humanity trying to snag the best deals before noon. First, let's talk sights. The market is an optical overload, a patchwork quilt of colourful stalls proffered by vendors hawking everything from local produce to exotic imports. Picture this: heaps of vibrant vegetables, stacks of rough-hewn bread loaves, and barrels of salted fish that look suspiciously like they might swim away if given half a chance. Over there, a merchant is unfurling a bolt of sumptuous velvet that's travelled all the way from Italy. Its deep burgundy hue a stark contrast to the drab woolen tunics worn by most of the townsfolk. Nearby, another trader is displaying a chest of glimmering spices, saffron, cinnamon, and cloves, each worth their weight in gold, or at least in a decent-sized goat. Speaking of goats, the market isn't just a place to buy goods. It's an impromptu petting zoo, whether you like it or not. Animals are everywhere, bleating sheep, clucking chickens, and the occasional disgruntled pig snorting its discontent. And let's not forget the horses, those noble beasts of burden, whose main role today seems to be adding to the olfactory assault that is the medieval market's signature scent, a heady blend of manure, sweat, and whatever's currently rotting in the gutter. Now, let's tune into the sounds. The air is filled with the cacophony of haggling, a symphony of shouts, grunts, and the occasional curse word that would make a sailor blush. Forget about price tags. Here, everything is negotiable. The art of the deal is alive and well in the medieval market, and it's as brutal as a cage match. Sharpers and sellers alike engage in verbal sparring matches worthy of a Shakespearean tragedy, each trying to outwit the other and shave a few pennies off the price. And let's not overlook the constant clang of the blacksmith's hammer, a rhythmic heartbeat that underscores the market's frenetic pace. Now, onto the smells. If you thought the visual and auditory chaos was intense, the olfactory experience is another level entirely. Close your eyes and imagine the aroma of freshly baked bread mingling with the scent of ripe apples, while somewhere in the background, a whiff of something slightly more dubious suggests that sanitation isn't exactly a top priority. The air is thick with the pungent perfume of humanity and livestock, a scent that can only be described as authentically medieval. But let's not get too distracted by sensory overload. Focus, and you'll notice the intricate dance of commerce playing out before you. The medieval market isn't just about selling goods. It's a microcosm of the broader economy, a place where bartering reigns supreme, but cash payments are slowly creeping in with the stealth of a ninja. Coins jingle and clink as they change hands, each one a testament to the growing influence of currency over traditional barter. And what a quirky assortment of coins they are, a mishmash of penny, groat, and farthing, each with its own unique weight and value. It's a financial system that makes modern cryptocurrency look downright straightforward. In this bustling market, guilds are the puppet masters pulling the strings behind the scenes. These organizations, part trade union, part mafia, wield enormous power, dictating what can be sold, who can sell it, and at what price. Want to sell bread? You better be a member of the Bakers' Guild, or you might find your loaves confiscated faster than you can say, ye old monopoly. Guilds maintain strict control over quality and pricing, ensuring that their members' livelihoods are protected, but also ensuring that competition is as welcome as a porcupine in a balloon shop. Think of guilds as the medieval equivalent of a regulatory agency, except with a bit more flair for drama and the occasional threat of violence. They hold the power to make or break a trader's fortunes, and their influence extends beyond the market to the wider community. Being a guild member is both a privilege and a necessity, offering a safety net of support and protection in a world where the market's fortunes can turn on a dime, or a penny, as it were. So, what about pricing? If you think modern inflation is bad, try wrapping your head around medieval price fluctuations. The cost of goods can vary wildly, influenced by harvest yields, trade routes, and the whims of nature itself. A sack of grain might cost a few pennies today, but after a bad harvest, it could set you back a small fortune. And those exotic spices, they're not just expensive because they're rare. They're expensive because each pinch could be your ticket to a culinary escape from the monotony of bland medieval fare. In this chaotic marketplace, the stakes are high, and the rewards can be great for those who play the game well. The market isn't just a place to buy and sell. It's a theater of human ambition, where fortunes are won and lost, and the hustle never stops. As you navigate this vibrant tapestry of commerce and chaos, remember, you're not just a spectator in this medieval drama. You're part of a larger economic ecosystem, a world where every transaction is a small yet vital piece of a much grander puzzle. As the sun climbs higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the cobblestones, the market shows no signs of slowing down. The chatter of voices, the clatter of goods, and the clamor of coins create an unending, pulsating rhythm, a testament to the indomitable spirit of medieval commerce. But don't get too comfortable. This is just the beginning. The market's true complexities and intrigues are yet to unfold, and there's still much more to explore in this whirlwind of trade and tradition. Welcome to the medieval market town. It's a wild ride, and you've only just begun. As you wade deeper into this medieval market melee, it's time to confront the culinary reality of lunchtime. Forget about gourmet food trucks or hipster cafes. This is the age where farm-to-table was less about trendiness and more about survival. Let's dive into the gastronomical delights, or, depending on your palate, horrors, of a medieval market town. First up, the bread. No medieval meal was complete without it. It was the holy grail of the medieval diet, the gluten-laden backbone of every meal. But before you start visualizing artisanal sourdough, let's get real. Bread back then was as diverse as the people eating it. The wealthy munched on fine white loaves made from wheat, while the common folk settled for coarser, darker bread made from rye or barley. In some places, you might encounter bread so heavy it could double as a doorstop. The cost, about a farthing for a loaf of barley bread in 1,300, if you were lucky. But bread wasn't just food, it was currency. In some cases, bakers would be fined or punished for selling underweight loaves, kind of medieval consumer protection, if you will. Next on the menu is ale, the medieval version of hydration. Water wasn't exactly drinkable unless you fancied a side of dysentery, so ale was the go-to beverage. It was nutritious, filling, and most importantly, alcoholic, which meant it was safer than water. Even children drank it, though it was weaker than the stuff you'd find at your local bar today. Brewing ale was a household affair, and the quality could be as unpredictable as a medieval weather forecast. Fun fact, women, known as alewives, often ran the brewing business. These ladies were the microbrewers of their day, minus the flannel shirts and ironic beards. But let's not forget the rest of the medieval menu. Meat was a luxury, often reserved for feast days or the well-to-do. If you were lucky enough to snag some, it was likely salted, smoked, or pickled to last through the lean months. Vegetables weren't winning any popularity contests, often seen as food for the poor. Instead, pulses like peas and beans were the medieval superfoods, providing essential proteins in a world where kale hadn't yet been invented. And then there were the pies. Forget about delicate pastry. These were robust, crusty affairs designed to encase and preserve their fillings. It's a meat lover's dream or nightmare, depending on your views on offal. And now, the not-so-palatable part, sanitation. The medieval market town was, to put it mildly, a biohazard. Picture it, open-air stalls with food exposed to the elements and a lack of refrigeration that made spoilage a constant threat. Forget about health inspectors. The closest you'd get was a rat scuttling by, giving its nod of approval. Streets doubled as sewers, with waste thrown into the gutters. The aroma of the market, a complex bouquet of spices, fresh produce, and the unmistakable stench of a city without a sanitation department. It's a miracle any of them survived long enough to die of something else. Despite their dubious quality, market foods had their appeal. They were fresh, often picked or slaughtered that morning, and local, supporting the town's economy. The hustle and bustle of the market were part of the allure, turning a simple purchase into a social event. But let's not romanticize it too much. Food poisoning was as common as a medieval cold, and the concept of farm-to-table often included a few unexpected detours. There's an enduring myth of the medieval feast, tables groaning under the weight of roasted meats, sumptuous pies, and overflowing goblets of wine. Let's puncture that bubble. Yes, feasts existed, but they were the exception, not the rule, reserved for the elite or special occasions. For everyone else, daily meals were far more modest, a testament to a life where every scrap counted. The market was a place of necessity, not luxury, where the average Joe or Jane scratched out a living one transaction at a time. As the sun reaches its zenith, casting a warm glow over the market, you find yourself both fascinated and slightly nauseated by the sensory overload. This isn't just a market, it's a microcosm of medieval life, from its economic intricacies to its dietary quirks. The medieval market isn't just a place to buy lunch. It's a battleground of survival, where every loaf, every pint, and every penny tells a story of human ingenuity and endurance. So, tuck into your coarse bread and swig of ale, and take a moment to appreciate the gritty reality of medieval market life. It's a world where every meal is a reminder of the harshness, and oddly enough, the resilience of a bygone era. But don't linger too long. There's still much more to explore, and the market's complexities are far from exhausted. After all, we've only just scratched the surface of this historical tapestry, and there's plenty more where that came from. As you polish off your medieval lunch, you're suddenly aware of a shift in the market's atmosphere. It's as if someone has turned the volume knob from a brisk morning hustle to an afternoon crescendo. Welcome to the post-lunch spectacle, medieval market entertainment, where performers transform cobblestones into center stage, reminding everyone that life isn't just about haggling over barley and bread. First up, jugglers. The medieval equivalent of a viral TikTok star. With a deftness that'd make Cirque du Soleil jealous, they toss flaming torches, wooden clubs, and sometimes even the odd chicken, presumably a volunteer, with a nonchalance that belies the risk of immolation. These performers aren't just about flash. They are delivering a much-needed break from the grind, dazzling the crowd, and hopefully earning enough coins to fill their own bread baskets. But the jugglers have some stiff competition. Enter the musicians, strumming away on their lutes and rebecks, instruments that look like they might be a failed high school sharp project, but sound like a medieval Spotify playlist. These troubadours weave tales of epic battles, unrequited love, and heroic quests, each note a siren call drawing listeners away from the monotony of daily life. It's music with a purpose, transporting listeners to places they can only dream of while standing ankle-deep in market sludge. And here's a plot twist. These entertainers aren't just there for fun and games. They're the market's unwitting social glue, drawing together people from all walks of life. Lords and ladies might pause to listen, casting coins at the performers' feet, while peasants gather around, appreciating the show without spending a penny. It's a democratizing force, a temporary suspension of the rigid social hierarchies that usually dictate every interaction. Speaking of social hierarchies, let's take a closer look at the marketplace pecking order. Here, status isn't just about what you sell, but where you sell it. The prime real estate is reserved for those with power and influence, guild members, wealthy merchants, and savvy traders who have greased the right palms. They're the medieval influencers, setting trends and dictating what's hot or not in woolen tunics. Meanwhile, the small-time vendors and itinerant peddlers are relegated to the market's fringes, literally and metaphorically. These underdogs scratch out a living on the edges. The stalls are hodgepodge of the essential and the exotic, hoping to snag a sale from the inattentive or the indiscriminate. It's a dog-eat-dog world, where every inch of market space is a testament to someone's social standing, or lack thereof. But let's not forget the market's role as a medieval newsroom. Forget about your morning paper or evening news broadcast. The market is where the real action happens. Here, gossip is currency, and news spreads faster than wildfire. Town criers belt out proclamations with the authority of 1,000 tweets, while merchants exchange whispers about distant wars, royal scandals, and the latest tax edicts. It's a hub of information, where knowing the right news can mean the difference between profit and loss. Political discourse, too, finds its place amid the clamour. Picture a group of townsfolk gathered around a charismatic speaker, debating the merits of the latest king or the efficacy of the local constable. These aren't just idle chats. They're impromptu town meetings, where the seeds of change are sown in the fertile soil of public opinion. It's democracy in its rawest form, a reminder that even in an age of absolute monarchs, the voice of the people still carries weight. And of course, where there's discourse, conflict isn't far behind. The market is a venue for disputes as much as deals. A wrong look, a slighted word, or a disputed penny can lead to a scuffle that draws a crowd faster than a juggler on fire. These aren't just petty squabbles. They're the market's way of maintaining order, a primitive form of conflict resolution where fists often speak louder than words. Yet, amid the chaos, there's a method, a medieval version of checks and balances, ensuring that no one walks away with more than they deserve, at least not without a fight. So, as the afternoon stretches on, the market reveals itself as more than just a trading post. It's a living, breathing organism, a microcosm of medieval society, where entertainment, social stratification, and political discourse intermingle in a vibrant tapestry of human interaction. Far from being isolated or insular, these towns are bustling hubs of activity, each one a testament to the ingenuity and resilience of people making the most of their lot in life. And that's the beauty of it. In the medieval market town, nothing exists in isolation. Every juggler, every musician, every merchant and peasant is part of a complex web of interdependence, each playing their role in the grand drama of daily life. It's a scene that's as chaotic as it is captivating, a reminder that beneath the grime and grit, there's a pulse of humanity that's both timeless and relatable. But don't get too comfortable with this snapshot of medieval life. There's still much more to explore, more layers to peel back in this historical onion. As the sun begins its slow descent and shadows stretch long across the cobblestones, the market's dynamics continue to evolve. So stick around. There's plenty more history to unravel, and you won't want to miss a moment of it. As the sun begins its slow descent and shadows stretch long across the cobblestones, the market's dynamics continue to evolve, revealing another layer of this medieval kaleidoscope. It's time to delve into the political and economic significance of market towns, those bustling hubs that were far more than just a backdrop for our medieval marsh pit. Let's start with a little-known fact. These market towns were like the medieval world's version of Silicon Valley, minus the tech giants and kombucha. They were the engines driving economic growth, each town a cog in the vast machine of regional and international trade. But unlike today's startups, they didn't run on venture capital. They ran on something far more tangible, town charters. Now, these charters weren't just decorative scrolls to hang on a wall. No, they were the medieval equivalent of a business license, granting towns the legal right to host markets and fairs. Without one, your town was about as useful as a castle without a moat. These charters were issued by kings or lords, who, in exchange for their favor, expected a cut of the profits. It's the classic, "I'll scratch your back if you fill my coffers" scenario. And what did these charters do? They established market regulations, a set of rules as intricate as a Game of Thrones plotline. Regulations dictated everything from who could sell what, where stalls could be set up, to the all-important tolls and taxes. Imagine a medieval regulatory board, complete with quills and parchment, ensuring that no one sold their salted fish or woolen cloth without the proper paperwork. It was bureaucracy at its finest, but with a distinctly medieval flair. These regulations were crucial, not just for maintaining order, but also for maintaining fairness, or at least a semblance of it. They ensured that local merchants weren't undercut by itinerant traders swooping in with bargain basement prices. In a sense, they were like a medieval trade union, protecting local interests, but also stifling competition. It was a delicate balancing act, like juggling flaming torches while riding a unicycle. But the influence of market towns stretched beyond the local economy. They were the nodes in a sprawling network of trade routes reaching as far as the Silk Road, where spices, fabrics, and other exotic goods traveled thousands of miles to end up on a rickety market stall. These towns were the linchpins of medieval commerce, connecting the dots between rural production and urban consumption. Without them, the grand tapestry of medieval trade would unravel faster than a poorly woven cloak. Now, let's talk about regional and international trade. Forget about just trading sheep for grain with the next village over. We're talking about trade that crossed borders and cultures, where a bolt of Flemish linen might end up in a Tuscan tailor's workshop. This was a time when the world was both smaller and larger than we can imagine. Smaller because travel was arduous and perilous. Larger because each journey felt like an epic quest. The goods that flowed through these market towns weren't just commodities. They were cultural exchanges, each item carrying with it the whispers of distant lands and peoples. A bag of pepper wasn't just a spice. It was a story of a long, perilous journey from the east. A piece of silk wasn't just fabric. It was a testament to the skill of weavers thousands of miles away. These items were the medieval world's way of experiencing the exotic without ever leaving home. But let's not get too swept up in the romance of it all. The gritty reality was that the market wasn't just a place of opportunity. It was a place of survival. For many, the market was a last-ditch effort to make ends meet, to scrape together enough coins to survive another week. The allure of the exotic was often overshadowed by the harsh realities of daily life, where fortunes could be won or lost on the whim of a buyer's mood or the sudden appearance of a rival's cheaper wares. So why wouldn't you last a day in a medieval market town? Because beyond the colorful stalls and the intoxicating aromas, there lies a world of complexity and competition, a place where every transaction is a test of endurance and wit. It's a place where the stakes are as high as the piles of grain, and the only certainty is uncertainty. As the market winds down, and the last of the merchants pack up their stalls, you're left with a sense of awe and a hint of relief. The medieval market town, with all its chaos and charm, has shown you a side of history that's raw and unfiltered. It's a world where the lines between legend and reality blur, where every day is a battle, and every night a hard-won victory. In the fading light, as the last echoes of the day's hustle fade into the night, you're left to ponder the legacy of these market towns. They were more than just places of trade. They were crucibles of culture and commerce, shaping the world in ways that still resonate today. They remind us that history isn't just the story of kings and queens, but of the everyday people who lived, worked, and survived against the odds. And as you finally step away from the cobblestones, you carry with you not just the dust of a medieval market, but a deeper understanding of the human spirit, resilient, resourceful, and always ready for the next challenge. Because in the end, that's the true legacy of the medieval market town, a testament to the enduring power of human endeavor, a reminder that even in the grittiest of realities, there's always room for a little bit of magic. In the bustling world of ancient Rome, where the toga was as essential as Wi-Fi is today, a young boy named Marcus Aurelius was born in 121 AD into a family that was as rich as they were dramatic. You know the type, the kind who have both a villa and a scandal in every province. His father, Marcus Annius Verus Roman III, had a good thing going, serving as a praetor, which was essentially the Roman equivalent of a high-ranking judge, while his mother, Domitia Lucilla, belonged to a family that owned one of the largest brick factories in the Roman Empire. Yes, bricks, because when you're building an empire, you need a lot of those. Now, Marcus might have been born with a silver spoon, but that didn't mean his life was all gladiator games and wine-fueled feasts. Oh no, his was a childhood peppered with enough family drama to rival a modern soap opera. His father died when Marcus was just 3 years old, leaving him with a mother who was probably more interested in keeping the family clay pits running smoothly than in bedtime stories. Enter his grandfather, Marcus Annius Verus Roman II, who stepped in to fill the paternal void. Think of this elder Verus as the ultimate Roman grandpa, heir to a senatorial legacy, wealthy enough to make even the most ambitious Roman matrons swoon, and deeply committed to the education of his grandson. This is where the delightful chaos of Roman education comes into play. Forget the cliché of toga-clad kids learning to wrestle lions. Young Marcus was more likely to wrestle with philosophical conundrums. His early tutors were a who's who of intellectual heavyweights of the time. For starters, there was Diognetus, a painter and philosopher who introduced Marcus to the joys of philosophy. And by joys, I mean the kind of existential debates that make you question your entire existence before lunch. Then there was Junius Rusticus, a Stoic philosopher whose teachings would later become the backbone of Marcus's own philosophical musings. Speaking of Stoicism, let's burst a bubble here. It's not all about being emotionless or a human version of a brick wall. Stoicism, as Marcus would learn, is more about enduring life's many curveballs with grace and dignity. And let's face it, a healthy dose of eye-rolling. Marcus's education wasn't just confined to the dusty scrolls of his tutors. The Roman elite had a peculiar obsession with grooming future leaders as if they were bonsai trees, meticulously shaped and pruned to perfection. This meant Marcus was subjected to intense courses in rhetoric, philosophy, and law, all while being fitted for togas that probably felt like wearing a bedsheet in a heat wave. Marcus's life took a dramatic turn when he was adopted by the Emperor Hadrian. Now, Hadrian wasn't just any emperor. He was the architectural genius behind the Pantheon and the guy who thought building a wall across Britain was a solid weekend project. The adoption came with all the fanfare you might expect, lavish ceremonies, public declarations, and probably a few awkward family dinners. Hadrian, childless and looking for a successor, was clearly impressed by Marcus's potential. And so, Marcus was set on a path that would eventually lead him to the throne, even if he didn't yet fit into his imperial sandals. The ancient Romans had this endearing obsession with debates, particularly those about Stoicism versus Epicureanism. Picture this: Roman salons buzzing with intellectuals arguing over whether the pursuit of pleasure, Epicureanism, was superior to the virtue of enduring pain and hardship, Stoicism. Marcus, naturally, found himself leaning towards Stoicism, much to the chagrin of those who preferred a life of feasting and merriment. He was like the guy at the party who sips water while everyone else downs their third glass of wine, calm, collected, and just a tad judgmental. And let's not sugarcoat it. Being the emperor-in-waiting came with its own set of perks and pressures. Marcus might have had the best tutors, but he also had to deal with the not-so-charming side of Roman politics. The Roman Senate could be as cutthroat as they come, with enough backstabbing to make a Game of Thrones plot seem tame. Marcus had to learn the art of diplomacy early, understanding that one misstep could lead to a literal fall from grace. In the midst of all this, young Marcus was known for his humility. While others in his position might have paraded their future power like a peacock on steroids, Marcus preferred a quieter approach. He famously wore a simple cloak, much to the bewilderment of his more opulent peers, and carried himself with a dignity that seemed out of place in the decadent courts of Roman power. So there you have it, the early years of Marcus Aurelius, a young philosopher in the making, juggling family drama, philosophical debates, and the looming spectre of imperial power. These formative years were the crucible in which the future emperor was forged, setting the stage for a reign that would be as much about contemplation and philosophy as it was about politics and power. Stay tuned, because this is just the opening act in the life of one of Rome's most intriguing emperors. And so, with a toga that barely fit, and the expectations of an entire empire looming over him, Marcus Aurelius was thrust into the tumultuous world of Roman politics. Now, if you thought navigating family drama was tough, imagine sharing the throne of the world's most powerful empire with a co-emperor. Enter Lucius Verus, Marcus's adoptive brother and partner in imperial crime. Picture them as the ultimate odd couple, Marcus with his philosophical musings, and Lucius with a penchant for the good life that would put any reality TV star to shame. This dual emperorship was less about sharing power equally and more about necessity. Marcus needed a partner to help manage the sprawling Roman Empire, which was less a unified state and more like a multinational corporation with territories so vast they made today's G7 look like a neighborhood book club. The empire stretched from the sun-drenched beaches of Hispania to the bustling bazaars of Asia Minor, each region with its own set of problems that would make a modern CEO break into a sweat. Lucius Verus, with his golden larks and fondness for the finer things, was like a well-dressed distraction at a party where Marcus was trying to discuss the finer points of Stoicism. While Marcus was the embodiment of a philosopher king, Lucius was the life of the imperial party, complete with lavish banquets and the occasional chariot race. But don't let Lucius's party boy image fool you. He was no slouch when it came to military matters. In 162 AD, the Parthian Empire decided it was time to flex its muscles and invaded Armenia, threatening Rome's eastern provinces. Guess who stepped up? Our buddy cop duo, of course. While Marcus stayed back to manage the chaos that was the Roman Senate, Imagine the world's most tedious business meeting. But in Latin, Lucius headed east with the legions. Now, the Roman Senate, with its endless debates and political maneuvering, was notorious for its ability to turn even the simplest decision into a Herculean task. Meetings were long, drawn-out affairs, where senators pontificated on everything from military strategy to the proper way to wear a toga. Marcus, ever the Stoic, endured these meetings with the kind of patience that would make a saint envious. Meanwhile, Lucius was busy turning the Parthian campaign into his personal stage. The military campaign was successful, and by 166 AD, the Romans had not only defeated the Parthians, but had also captured the key cities of Ctesiphon and Seleucia. The victory was a PR dream. Roman propaganda machines went into overdrive, singing the praises of the emperors. But let's not get carried away. This wasn't exactly a walk in the imperial park. The war was costly, both in terms of money and lives, and the Roman treasury was feeling the pinch. Maintaining the empire's vast military machine was akin to keeping a fleet of luxury yachts afloat, extravagant and unsustainable in the long run. Back in Rome, Marcus had his hands full with domestic issues. The grain supply was a constant headache. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of running out of Wi-Fi. Rome's population was dependent on a steady influx of grain from Egypt and North Africa, and any disruption could lead to riots faster than you could say bread and circuses. The Roman economy, while formidable, was a beast that required constant feeding. Taxation was a necessary evil, and Marcus was well aware that squeezing the provinces too hard could lead to rebellion. In the midst of these challenges, Marcus continued to hone his philosophical insights, jotting down notes that would later become his famous work, *Meditations*. Written in Greek, these reflections were less a manifesto and more a personal diary, filled with thoughts on duty, leadership, and the human condition. It's hard not to admire someone who, in the midst of ruling an empire, found time to ponder the meaning of life. As if the political intrigues and military campaigns weren't enough, a new threat loomed on the horizon, the Antonine Plague, this devastating pandemic, which historians believe was either smallpox or measles, arrived in Rome with the returning soldiers from the Eastern Front. It spread like wildfire, decimating the population and stretching the empire's resources to the breaking point. The death toll was staggering, with estimates suggesting that up to 5 million people perished. It was a stark reminder that even emperors, with all their power, were not immune to the whims of fate. Through it all, Marcus remained a beacon of stability. While Lucius succumbed to illness in 169 AD, leaving Marcus as the sole ruler, Marcus's commitment to his Stoic principles provided a sense of continuity in a world teetering on chaos. The Roman Senate, with its endless debates and penchant for drama, continued to be both a source of frustration and a necessary institution for Marcus. He understood that ruling was not just about wielding power, but about maintaining the delicate balance between authority and consensus. As we leave Marcus and his empire for now, remember this: the life of an emperor was anything but glamorous. Between the political machinations, military campaigns, and public health crises, the Roman Empire was a pressure cooker that demanded constant vigilance. Marcus Aurelius, with his philosophical leanings and pragmatic approach, was uniquely suited to navigate these turbulent waters. But don't go away just yet. Our journey with Marcus is far from over. There are more battles to be fought, more philosophical musings to ponder, and more layers to peel back in the life of one of history's most fascinating rulers. So, just when you thought Marcus Aurelius might get a break to kick back with a scroll and some wine, the universe had other plans. Enter the Marcomannic Wars, a series of brutal conflicts that would drag on for nearly 2 decades and test Marcus's Stoic resolve more than any philosophical debate ever could. Picture this: the Roman Empire, already reeling from a pandemic that made modern plagues look like a mild inconvenience, suddenly finds itself facing a series of invasions along its northern frontier. The Marcomanni, Quadi, and a host of other Germanic tribes decided it was time to knock on Rome's door, and they weren't exactly bringing a welcome gift. Now, let's paint the financial picture here. The Roman treasury was already stretched thinner than a toga at a Roman feast, thanks to the costly campaigns in the east and the relentless appetite of the Roman military machine. Maintaining the legions was like running a top-tier sports team. It required constant investment, and the stakes were sky high. The cost of a single Roman legion was about 50 million sesterces a year, an astronomical sum in those days. Marcus, ever the philosopher, had to juggle the harsh realities of war with his love for peace and wisdom. Talk about a paradox worthy of Plato himself. Marcus didn't just face enemies on the battlefield, though. Back in Rome, the Senate was less of a supportive council and more of a bureaucratic obstacle course. Convincing them to approve additional military funding was like trying to sell a toga to a nudist. Marcus had to navigate this political minefield with all the finesse of a diplomat and the patience of a saint. And patience, as we know, was Marcus's middle name, figuratively speaking, of course. Despite his personal distaste for war, Marcus understood that sometimes the olive branch just wasn't enough. The Marcomannic Wars, which began around 166 AD, were a series of conflicts that required him to don the armor of a warlord, even as he longed to return to the robes of a philosopher. It's a bit like being forced to play lead guitar in a heavy metal band when all you want is to strum a quiet acoustic tune by the fire. Here's where Marcus's philosophical integrity was truly tested. While he was commanding legions on the Danube frontier, he continued to jot down his thoughts in what would later become his famous asterisk meditations asterisk. This was a man who, amidst the chaos of war, found time to reflect on the virtues of patience, duty, and the transient nature of life. It's almost as if Marcus was reminding himself, and perhaps us, that even in the most tumultuous times, there's room for contemplation and growth. Marcomannic Wars were not just a series of battles, but a logistical nightmare. Imagine coordinating the movement of tens of thousands of troops, supplies, and equipment across rough terrain, all while keeping morale high and the enemy at bay. Marcus, ever the pragmatist, knew that maintaining the loyalty of his soldiers was crucial. So, he made sure they were paid regularly and provided incentives, a move that was as strategic as it was necessary. The fighting was fierce, and the stakes were high. The Marcomanni and their allies were no pushovers. They were skilled warriors who knew their land like the back of their hands. For Marcus, every victory came at a cost, not just in terms of lives lost, but also in the strain it placed on the empire's resources. The Roman economy, already under pressure from the fallout of the Antonine Plague, had to be carefully managed to prevent collapse. It was a delicate balancing act, and Marcus walked the tightrope with the precision of a seasoned acrobat. Yet, through all this, Marcus managed to maintain his philosophical integrity. While the demands of war could have easily turned him into a tyrant, Marcus remained committed to his Stoic principles. He believed in ruling with wisdom and fairness, a belief that was often at odds with the brutal realities of imperial politics and warfare. It's this juxtaposition of warlord and philosopher that makes Marcus such a fascinating figure. He understood the necessity of war, but never lost sight of the value of peace. As the wars dragged on, Marcus's health began to suffer. The constant stress of command and the toll of battle took their toll, yet he soldiered on. Perhaps it was his Stoic training that allowed him to endure the hardships with such fortitude. After all, Marcus was the embodiment of the Stoic ideal, a man who faced adversity with calm resolve and unwavering courage. But let's not paint too rosy a picture here. Marcus's reign was far from flawless. His decision to elevate his son Commodus to co-emperor was a move that would later prove disastrous. Commodus, with his penchant for excess and questionable decision-making, was as far removed from his father's philosophical ideals as one could imagine. Yet, Marcus's choice was driven by a desire to ensure stability and continuity, even if it meant ignoring the glaring flaws in his son's character. As we leave Marcus on the battlefield, remember this: the life of a philosopher-emperor was a constant struggle between ideals and reality. Marcus Aurelius, with all his wisdom and introspection, was not immune to the pressures of leadership and the complexities of empire. His reign was a testament to the enduring power of philosophy in the face of chaos and conflict. But don't pack away your scrolls just yet. The story of Marcus Aurelius is far from over. There are more battles to be fought, more lessons to be learned, and more insights to be gleaned from the life of one of history's most intriguing rulers. Now, if Marcus Aurelius's life as a philosopher-emperor wasn't complicated enough, let's throw in a little thing called family. Because, why not? Marcus didn't just have an empire to run. He had a household that would make a sitcom seem like a documentary. His personal life was, to put it mildly, a Roman soap opera with a cast of thousands, or at least 14, to be precise. Yes, Marcus and his wife, Faustina, had 14 children, more kids than a minivan can hold, and certainly more than most of us have patience for. Faustina the younger was no mere supporting character in this historical drama. She was the daughter of Antoninus Pius, Marcus's predecessor, which made her both empress and a key political player. But let's not get too misty-eyed about their storybook marriage. The ancient sources, those dusty old tomes that historians love, suggest their relationship was more complex than a simple tale of love conquering all. Faustina was rumored to have had a few dalliances on the side, and while these stories make for juicy gossip, they were likely exaggerated by political rivals eager to stir the pot. In reality, Marcus and Faustina's marriage was a partnership of imperial proportions. While they might not have been the poster couple for marital bliss, they were united by a shared sense of duty and responsibility. The pressures of ruling an empire would test even the strongest of bonds, and Marcus had more than his share of pressures. Try balancing a budget that would make a modern-day finance minister weep, while dealing with teenage drama times 14, and you've got a recipe for stress that would make even a Stoic philosopher reach for the wine. Being a paterfamilias in ancient Rome was no walk in the park. It was a role that demanded as much political savvy as it did parental guidance. The paterfamilias was the head honcho of the Roman family, wielding life and death authority over his household. Marcus, with his philosophical leanings, might have been more lenient than most, but he still had to navigate the choppy waters of family politics. His children, like any siblings, had their share of squabbles, and managing their ambitions while maintaining family unity required a deft touch. The Roman family dynamic was as layered as a lasagna, with each layer adding its own flavor to the mix. The children of Faustina and Marcus were born into a world of privilege, yet they also faced immense expectations. With names like Lucilla, Fadilla, and Commodus, yes, that Commodus, the Aurelius kids were destined to play roles in the empire's future. But not all of them survived to adulthood, a harsh reminder of the fragility of life in ancient times. Disease and illness were ever-present threats, and even the imperial family wasn't immune. Now, let's talk about Commodus, because what's a family drama without a black sheep? Commodus, Marcus's son and eventual successor, was a character who seemed to have missed the Stoic memo. While Marcus was busy reflecting on virtue, Commodus was more interested in reflecting on his own reflection, often while dressed as Hercules, no less. His penchant for gladiatorial games and self-indulgence set him apart from his father's philosophical ideals, and Marcus's decision to name him successor has left historians scratching their heads since. But why would Marcus, a man known for his wisdom, choose Commodus as his heir? Some say it was a pragmatic choice, a way to ensure a smooth transition and avoid the chaos of a power struggle. Others suggest it was a father's blind spot for his son's flaws. Whatever the reason, it's clear that family loyalty played a significant role. Marcus's reign might have been defined by philosophical reflection, but when it came to family, even he couldn't escape the pull of tradition and duty. In the midst of all this, Marcus still found time to pen his Meditations*, a work that remains a cornerstone of Stoic philosophy. Written in the quiet moments between managing wars and family feuds, these reflections offer a glimpse into the mind of a man striving for balance amidst chaos. They reveal a leader committed to principles of justice and virtue, even when reality didn't always cooperate. Despite the challenges, Marcus's ability to juggle his roles as emperor, philosopher, and family man is a testament to his character. It's easy to romanticize his life as one of introspective tranquility, but the truth is, Marcus was constantly under siege, from external enemies, from the demands of his role, and from the complexities of his own family. So, while the legend of Marcus Aurelius might paint him as an unflappable sage, the reality was far more nuanced. He was a man tasked with holding an empire together while also keeping his family from tearing apart at the seams. It's a story that reminds us that no matter how great the leader, they are still human, subject to the same trials and tribulations as the rest of us. As we leave this chapter of Marcus's life, remember this: the balance between public duty and private life is a timeless struggle. Marcus Aurelius, with all his wisdom and stoicism, was no exception. His legacy is not just one of philosophical insight, but of human resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. And while we may have reached the end of this part of his journey, there's still more to explore in the life of Rome's philosopher emperor. Keep those togas handy, because the final act is yet to come. As we wrap up our epic journey through the life of Marcus Aurelius, we arrive at the part where we sift through the myths and truths of his legacy. It's a bit like soaring through a Roman flea market. Lots of shiny things, but you need to dig to find the real treasures. Marcus's reign as emperor is often romanticized as a golden age of wisdom and virtue, but let's set aside the rose-tinted glasses for a moment and take a closer look. First up, Marcus's famous asterisk meditations asterisk. These philosophical musings are often touted as the personal diary of a sage emperor, filled with insights that could put modern self-help books to shame. But were they truly personal reflections, or could they have been a strategic move in the political chess game of history? Consider this. Marcus wrote in Greek, a language that was fashionable among the educated elite, but not exactly the lingua franca of the average Roman. Was he simply jotting down his private thoughts, or was he crafting a legacy aimed at impressing posterity? After all, even emperors needed a bit of PR magic to secure their place in history. Let's not forget that the meditations weren't published during his lifetime. They were discovered posthumously, which adds a layer of mystery. If they were private, why write them in such an enduring format? Perhaps Marcus knew that someday someone would find them, and voila, instant philosopher rockstar status. It's a tantalizing thought, but one that leaves us wondering. Was Marcus the genuine article, or was he just savvy enough to write himself into the annals of history? Now, onto Marcus's succession plan, or as some might call it, the imperial blunder that keeps on giving. Naming Commodus as his heir was like handing the keys of a Ferrari to a toddler. Commodus was everything Marcus was not. Impulsive, indulgent, and more interested in gladiatorial games than governance. Some say Marcus was blinded by paternal love. Others argue it was a calculated risk to avoid a power struggle. Either way, it was a decision that backfired spectacularly, leading to a reign that historians describe as the beginning of Rome's decline. Commodus's rule, stretching from 180 to 192 AD, was marked by a blend of theatrical antics and administrative neglect. He fancied himself a gladiator and often participated in the games, which was about as appropriate as a president moonlighting as a cage fighter. The political ramifications were serious. His reign saw increased corruption and destabilization, setting the stage for what many call Rome's slow descent into chaos. So, what does all this say about Marcus's legacy? It's a mixed bag, to put it mildly. His philosophical ideals were noble, and they've influenced generations of thinkers, from Renaissance scholars to modern-day CEOs quoting Stoicism like it's the latest business mantra. Yet, the reality of his reign was far more complex. Marcus was a man who strived for wisdom and virtue, but was also constrained by the harsh realities of leadership and the unpredictability of human nature. His legacy is a testament to human fallibility, an emperor who sought to live by Stoic principles, but was often at the mercy of circumstances beyond his control. It's a reminder that even the wisest among us can make monumental mistakes, and that sometimes the lessons we leave behind are more about our shortcomings than our successes. Yet, despite the flaws and the failed succession, Marcus's influence echoes through history. His asterisk meditations asterisk remain a touchstone for those seeking guidance in turbulent times. They offer a window into the mind of a ruler who, despite the weight of an empire on his shoulders, never stopped seeking wisdom. They remind us that even in the midst of chaos, there can be moments of clarity and insight. In the end, Marcus Aurelius stands as a symbol of the eternal struggle between ideals and reality. His reign was not the unblemished era of peace and wisdom that some might wish to believe, but neither was it a failure. It was a complex tapestry woven from the threads of philosophy, politics, and personal imperfection. So, as we close the book on Marcus's life, let's hold on to this. The real lesson isn't about achieving Stoic perfection, but understanding that wisdom often comes from acknowledging our own fallibility. Marcus's story is a reminder that the path to greatness is rarely a straight line. It's a winding road filled with unexpected detours, challenges, and yes, the occasional philosophical reflection. And there you have it, the life of Marcus Aurelius, philosopher emperor, as seen through the lens of history. A tale of ambition, wisdom, and the enduring power of human resilience. So next time you're faced with your own challenges, remember Marcus, the emperor who wrote his legacy not just in deeds, but in words that continue to inspire and provoke thought, long after the toga has been folded away. In the grand tapestry of human history, few figures stand out quite like Hatshepsut, a woman who thumbed her nose at tradition and wore the crown of Egypt like she was born for it. And maybe she was. At least, that's what she'd have you believe. Divine birthright and all that jazz. Now, let's dive into the life of this extraordinary pharaoh, but hold onto your linen headdress, because the tale is as tangled as a sand dune in a desert storm. Hatshepsut was born around 1507 BCE into the 18th dynasty of Egypt, a time when the Nile was more than just a river. It was the lifeline of an empire. Her father, Thutmose I, was a king who knew how to expand borders and build monuments, setting a high bar for his offspring. Hatshepsut had the bloodline, but she also had a problem, a little thing called being female in a male-dominated world. You see, in ancient Egypt, the idea of a woman running the show was about as popular as a sandstorm during a harvest festival. Enter the politically savvy Hatshepsut, who had a few tricks up her sleeve, or rather under her royal kilt. She married her half-brother, Thutmose Roman II. Yes, you heard that right. Royal succession in Egypt was a family affair, and by family, I mean keep it in the family. Thutmose Roman II wasn't exactly a powerhouse ruler. Think of him more as a placeholder, a warm-up act for the main event. His reign was short and unspectacular, lasting from about 1493 to 1479 BCE, which left a convenient power vacuum for Hatshepsut to fill. Now, here's where it gets juicy. After Thutmose Roman II's death, his son by a secondary wife, Thutmose Roman III, was merely a child. This pint-sized heir was technically the king, but let's face it, nobody wanted a toddler making executive decisions. Enter Hatshepsut, who stepped into the role of regent, a title that loosely translates to I'm in charge till this kid grows up. But why settle for regent when there's a perfectly good throne up for grabs? Hatshepsut's ascension to Pharaoh was a masterclass in political maneuvering. She didn't just claim the throne, she practically reinvented the concept of leadership. She declared herself Pharaoh around 1473 BCE, and just to make sure everyone got the memo, started sporting the full regalia, including the false beard, a symbol of power that screamed, I may be a woman, but I'm the boss around here. But how did she justify this unprecedented move? Simple. She rewrote the narrative. Hatshepsut claimed divine birthright, stating that the god Ammon had visited her mother in the guise of Thutmose I. It was a divine endorsement that would make even the most skeptical of court officials pause. If the gods were on her side, who was anyone to argue? This clever spin not only placated the traditionalists, but also cemented her status as a legitimate ruler. After all, if the gods had a hand in it, who could complain? With divine backing, Hatshepsut wasted no time in getting down to business. She focused on building projects and trade expeditions, ensuring her legacy would be as solid as the obelisk she erected. But more on those feats later. For now, let's bask in the audacity of her rise to power. Hatshepsut didn't just break the glass ceiling. She shattered it with a sledgehammer and then rebuilt it in her own image. So, here we are, introduced to a woman who defied societal norms and seized power in a world that wasn't ready for her. But Hatshepsut was nothing if not persistent, and she wasn't about to let a little thing like tradition stand in her way. The stage was set, the players were in place, and the drama of Hatshepsut's reign was just beginning. Stay tuned, because this is one historical saga you won't want to miss. So, with the stage set for Hatshepsut's reign, our leading lady didn't waste any time. She dove headfirst into what can only be described as a building spree that would make even modern real estate moguls blush. And at the heart of this architectural revolution was her piece de resistance, the temple at Deir el-Bahri. Nestled snugly against the cliffs of the Theban Mountains, this grand structure was less a temple and more a testament to Hatshepsut's ambition and flair for the dramatic. Now, let's not kid ourselves. Deir el-Bahri wasn't just slapped together with a bit of elbow grease and a prayer to Ammon. This was a meticulously planned project, a blueprint for divine splendor that required an army of laborers, architects, and artisans. Imagine a bustling hive of activity, with thousands of workers toiling under the relentless Egyptian sun. The numbers alone are staggering. Estimates suggest that over 20,000 laborers were involved, a small city in itself. These workers weren't just building a temple, they were carving a legacy in stone. And speaking of stone, let's talk about the logistics. The sandstone used for Deir el-Bahari was quarried from the nearby hills, while the more exotic materials like granite and limestone had to be transported from Aswan and Tura, respectively. This wasn't just a weekend DIY project. This was an ancient logistical nightmare that required coordination on a scale that even the most seasoned project managers would find daunting. But how did Hatshepsut fund this architectural wonder? Sure, she had the Nile, the lifeline of Egypt, but a river doesn't exactly pay the bills, or in this case, the stone masons. Enter the land of Punt, the ancient world's answer to a mythical treasure chest. Hatshepsut's trade expedition to Punt wasn't just a bold economic move. It was a masterstroke in diplomacy and resource acquisition. Think of Punt like a fantastical marketplace, brimming with incense, gold, ebony, and exotic animals, a veritable Aladdin's cave that Hatshepsut had every intention of raiding, with a polite note, of course. The journey to Punt was no small feat. Picture a fleet of ships, laden with goods to trade, sailing down the Red Sea, navigating treacherous waters and unpredictable winds. The expedition itself was a PR campaign in motion, effectively saying, "Look at what I can do." When the fleet returned, laden with treasures and resources, it wasn't just an economic victory. It was a political triumph that solidified Hatshepsut's reign and funded her ambitious projects. Now, while we might be tempted to romanticize Hatshepsut's reign as all grandeur and glory, the reality was more complex. The temple at Deir el-Bahari wasn't just a monument to her divine rulership. It was a statement of power, a not-so-subtle reminder to her subjects and potential rivals that she was not to be trifled with. The temple's inscriptions and reliefs didn't just tell stories. They were propaganda, carefully curated narratives that reinforced her legitimacy and divine birthright. Let's not forget, this was ancient Egypt, where the line between the divine and the political was blurrier than the Nile after a flood. Hatshepsut's temple, with its grand colonnades and terraces, was more than a religious site. It was a stage for the drama of her reign, declared to anyone who cared to listen or dared to challenge that Hatshepsut was here to stay, and she had the guards backing to prove it. But don't be fooled by the grandeur. Behind the scenes, the economics of empire building were relentless. Those trade expeditions to Punt and the vast labor force weren't just about ambition, they were about survival. Hatshepsut understood that to maintain power, she needed resources, both human and material. Her reign was a balancing act, a delicate dance between divine right and earthly logistics. As we delve deeper into Hatshepsut's reign, it's clear that her architectural ambitions weren't just about leaving a mark. They were about reshaping the narrative. Her temple at Deir el-Bahari wasn't just a pretty facade. It was a complex symbol of power, divinity, and political savvy. And while the myths surrounding her reign are tantalizing, the reality is far more intriguing. A blend of audacity, strategy, and more than a little bit of showmanship. So, what's next in this saga of stone and strategy? We've seen the foundations of Hatshepsut's legacy, but her reign had more layers than an onion at a pharaoh's feast. Stay tuned as we peel back the next layer and uncover the mysteries of her trade routes, her economic policies, and the political chess game that was ancient Egypt. Spoiler alert, it's a ride you won't want to miss. Speaking of political chess games, Hatshepsut played hers with the finesse of a grandmaster. In a world where men were expected to wear the crown, she didn't just get a seat at the table. She flipped the board and made her own rules. Let's talk about her political acumen, shall we? This was a woman who understood that power wasn't just about wielding a scepter, but about crafting an image and managing perceptions. Imagine ancient Egypt as Hollywood and Hatshepsut as the ultimate director, scriptwriter, and star of her own blockbuster. Her first move, the propaganda machine that would make any modern spin Dr. Green with envy. Hatshepsut didn't just dabble in statues and inscriptions. She orchestrated a full-blown media campaign. Picture this, statues of Hatshepsut with the full masculine regalia of a pharaoh, complete with the Nemes headdress, kilt, and yes, that iconic false beard. These statues were not merely artistic expressions, but political statements etched in stone. They screamed, "I belong here, deal with it." And for those keeping score, We're talking about over 100 statues, each intricately designed to send a clear message to anyone daring to question her legitimacy. But why stop at statues when you can rewrite the narrative? Hatshepsut didn't just tell people she was king, she showed them. Her temple at Deir el-Bahri was adorned with inscriptions that portrayed her divine birthright and illustrated her as the chosen one by the gods. In these inscriptions, she wasn't just another ruler. She was the ruler, divinely sanctioned and unassailable. It was a masterclass in spin, the ancient equivalent of a viral marketing campaign. Now, let's not sugarcoat it. The political landscape was a minefield. Hatshepsut had to navigate a court full of officials who might have preferred a male ruler, not to mention a young stepson, Thutmose Roman III, who was technically the king. Was Thutmose Roman III merely a pawn in a game, or was he biding his time, waiting for the right moment to claim his birthright? The jury's still out on that one, but one thing is clear. Hatshepsut knew how to keep him in check. For starters, she kept him busy, appointing him to military training and minor campaigns. It was a classic case of keep your friends close and your potential rivals closer. By doing so, she not only groomed him for future leadership, but also ensured he wasn't stirring up trouble back home. This was a woman who understood that the best way to maintain power was to manage potential threats before they became actual ones. But let's not forget the most powerful tool in her arsenal, her inner circle of advisors. Hatshepsut surrounded herself with loyal officials who were more than just yes-men. They were her eyes, ears, and sometimes the muscle she needed to enforce her policies. Chief among them was Senenmut, her trusted advisor and architect, who not only helped design her grand monuments, but also managed her household and affairs. His loyalty was unwavering, and his influence was far-reaching, making him an indispensable ally in her reign. And while we're on the subject of allies, let's not overlook the economic strategies that fortified her rule. Hatshepsut understood that to keep the wheels of power turning, she needed resources. Her trade expeditions, particularly to Punt, were not just about acquiring treasures, but about securing alliances and ensuring a steady flow of goods into Egypt. These economic ventures weren't just the backbone of her building projects. They were the lifeblood of her reign, providing the material and political capital she needed to maintain her position. But wait, before you crown her as the ultimate power broker, let's address the elephant in the room. Did Hatshepsut's reign truly hold absolute power, or was it a delicate balancing act? The truth is, her power was as much about perception as it was about control. She managed to keep the facade of stability, but beneath it lay a complex web of alliances, rivalries, and potential threats. It was a house of cards that relied heavily on her ability to outmaneuver her opponents and keep her supporters in line. Consider this. While Hatshepsut was busy building temples and trading with distant lands, Thutmose Roman III was growing up, learning the ropes and wading in the wings. Was he merely a pawn, or was he quietly preparing to step into the spotlight? Historical records suggest that Thutmose Roman III was no slouch. By the time he took over, he proved himself to be a capable and strategic ruler, leading to speculation that perhaps he was more of a silent partner than a passive observer. As we peel back the layers of Hatshepsut's reign, it becomes clear that her story is as much about the art of governance as it is about the art of illusion. She was a master of both, crafting a narrative that ensured her place in history while skillfully navigating the treacherous waters of Egyptian politics. In a world where male dominance was the norm, she didn't just survive. She thrived, leaving a legacy that would be debated and admired for millennia. But don't get too comfortable in this historical soap opera. There are more twists to come. We've scratched the surface of Hatshepsut's political prowess, but what about her economic strategies and the intricate dance of diplomacy that defined her reign? And where does Thutmose Roman III fit into this grand narrative? Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the saga, exploring the machinations and mysteries that defined one of history's most enigmatic pharaohs. The story of Hatshepsut is far from over, and trust me, you won't want to miss the next chapter. As we dive headlong into the twilight of Hatshepsut's rule, let's just say the plot thickens faster than the Nile's annual inundation. Our leading lady, despite her impressive resume, didn't exactly write the ending to her own story. Spoiler alert. She vanishes from the historical record in 1458 BCE, disappearing like a magician's assistant in an elaborate trick. But unlike magic, there's no sleight of hand here. just a mix of mystery, intrigue, and a touch of good old-fashioned historical revisionism courtesy of Thutmose Roman III. Now, let's set the stage. Hatshepsut's reign was one of relative peace and prosperity, but by the time of her disappearance, the political winds were shifting. Thutmose Roman III, who up until now had been playing second fiddle, was ready for his solo. And let's not sugarcoat it. His transition from reluctant understudy to headliner was less about a seamless handover and more about a strategic erasure. Here's where the plot really thickens. After Hatshepsut's death, Thutmose Roman III embarked on a campaign to systematically erase her from history, like she was the answer to a question nobody was supposed to ask. Monuments were defaced, statues dismantled, and her name was chiseled out of inscriptions like a Pharaoh-sized typo. It wasn't just a case of out of sight, out of mind. It was a calculated move to reclaim authority and rewrite the narrative of his own reign. This was less about sibling rivalry and more about securing his legacy. And let's face it, there's no room for a co-star in a one-man show. But why all the historical airbrushing? Well, Thutmose Roman III might have been motivated by a need to re-establish traditional male rule. The idea of a female pharaoh was still as radical as a pyramid scheme without the pyramids. By erasing Hatshepsut, he was reinforcing the status quo, ensuring that his lineage and the patriarchal order remained unchallenged. Plus, he had some impressive feats of his own to brag about, including a series of military campaigns that expanded Egypt's borders like a pharaoh on a world domination tour. The erasure wasn't just about vanity, it was practical politics. Imagine trying to sell yourself as the ultimate ruler when your predecessor, who happened to be your stepmother, had already outshone you. Thutmose Roman III's strategy was like editing a Wikipedia page, except with more chiseling and less internet. By removing Hatshepsut's achievements, he could claim the glory for himself, reshaping his predecessor's successes as stepping stones to his own greatness. Fast forward to the modern era, and Hatshepsut's story reads like a cold case mystery waiting to be solved. Enter the archaeologists, history's detectives with a penchant for dusty artifacts and cryptic hieroglyphs. They pieced together the narrative of Hatshepsut's reign from fragments, like a jigsaw puzzle with pieces scattered across millennia. Her temple at Deir el-Bahari, once defaced, became a key site in the rediscovery of her story, whispering secrets that had lain dormant for centuries. One of the real breakthroughs in Hatshepsut's resurrection came in 1903 when Howard Carter, yes, the same guy who let her hit the Tutankhamun jackpot, discovered her tomb in the Valley of the Kings. It wasn't exactly a royal burial befitting her stature, but it was a start. The tomb, designated KV-20, was initially crafted for her father, Thutmose I, but Hatshepsut had it expanded for herself. Talk about a fixer-upper. But wait, the plot thickens even more. The real turning point came in 2007 when Dr. Zahi Hawass, the charismatic face of Egyptian archaeology, led the team that identified a previously overlooked mummy as Hatshepsut's. The clue, a missing molar found in a wooden box inscribed with her name, fitting the dental profile of the unearthed mummy like a key to a long-lost treasure chest. It was a eureka moment that brought Hatshepsut's story back into the spotlight, a dramatic plot twist worthy of any historical soap opera. So, what does this all mean for Hatshepsut's legacy? Despite Thutmose Roman III's best efforts at historical ghosting, Hatshepsut's story emerged from the shadows. Her reign, once a footnote, is now a focal point for scholars and history buffs alike. She's become a symbol of female empowerment and political savvy, a testament to the enduring intrigue of her life and the audacity of her rule. And yet, the mystery isn't fully unraveled. Why did Thutmose Roman III wait so long to start erasing her memory? Why not do it immediately after her death? Some suggest it was a matter of consolidating power, ensuring that his position was unassailable before attempting to rewrite history. Others propose that it might have been a gradual process, with Thutmose Roman III's successors continuing the erasure to align with their own political agendas. In the end, Hatshepsut's story is a fascinating blend of myth, mystery, and historical detective work. Her life and reign challenge our understanding of ancient Egypt's gender dynamics and political landscape, offering a fresh perspective on what it meant to wield power in a world dictated by tradition. She's a reminder that history isn't just a series of events, but a complex tapestry woven with the threads of human ambition, rivalry, and resilience. As we leave Hatshepsut's story open for more exploration, remember this. History isn't just written by the victors. It's rewritten by those who come after, piecing together the past from the fragments left behind. Hatshepsut may have been temporarily erased from history, but her legacy is anything but forgotten. Stay tuned, because the story of ancient Egypt's most enigmatic pharaoh is far from over. There's still plenty of sand left in this hourglass, and trust me, you won't want to miss the next chapter. Hatshepsut's story is like a classic case of historical hide-and-seek, where the seeker finally finds what they've been looking for, only to realize they've stumbled upon something far more interesting than expected. An enigma wrapped in linen, hidden in the annals of time. So, what does this grand tale tell us about the nature of power, both in ancient times and today? First, let's consider the sheer audacity of her achievements. Hatshepsut didn't just break the mold. She shattered it and recast it in her own image. Her reign from 1479 to 1458 BCE was marked by unprecedented peace and prosperity. The economy thrived under her rule, thanks in no small part to her shrewd trade policies. The expeditions to Punt weren't just about bringing back exotic goodies like incense, gold, and baboons. They were about securing Egypt's economic stability and expanding its influence. The sheer scale of these expeditions was remarkable, with fleets of ships braving the treacherous Red Sea to bring back the riches that would fund her ambitious building projects. Speaking of which, her architectural feats weren't just about aesthetics. They were strategic political statements. The temple at Deir el-Bahari wasn't merely a religious site. It was a monument to her power, a stone-clad proclamation of her divine right to rule. It took thousands of workers and years of labor, but the message was clear. Hatshepsut was here to stay, and she had the guards' approval to prove it. Her other projects, like the obelisks at Karnak, weren't just towering structures. They were symbols of stability, meant to reassure her subjects and intimidate her rivals. Yet the question remains, why was her story buried so thoroughly? The answer lies in the intricate dance of power and gender dynamics. Hatshepsut's very existence was a challenge to the patriarchal norms of the time. Ancient Egypt, despite its occasional fondness for female rulers, was still a man's world, where the idea of a woman holding the highest office was as unsettling as a crocodile in a koi pond. Thutmose's Roman III campaign to erase her was not merely an act of spite, it was a strategic maneuver to restore the traditional order and assert his own legitimacy. But here's the kicker. Despite his best efforts, Hatshepsut's legacy couldn't be entirely extinguished. Her story survived, not just as a cautionary tale, but as an inspiration. In modern times, she's become a symbol of female empowerment, a testament to what can be achieved when one refuses to be bound by societal norms. Her reign challenges our assumptions about gender and power, reminding us that leadership isn't about fitting into a predetermined role, but about defining the role on one's own terms. Moreover, Hatshepsut's story offers a profound lesson on the nature of history itself. It's a reminder that history is often written by those in power, but it can be rewritten by those who dare to question the status quo. Her rediscovery in the 20th century was like a phoenix rising from the ashes, an opportunity to reassess the narratives we've been told and explore the complexities beneath the surface. In the context of modern gender politics, Hatshepsut's reign is both a mirror and a lens. It reflects the ongoing struggle for gender equality, highlighting the challenges women face in breaking through glass ceilings, be they made of glass or stone. At the same time, it allows us to view our present through the lens of the past, offering insights into how far we've come and how far we still have to go. As we wrap up this historical odyssey, let's not forget the human element at the heart of Hatshepsut's story. She was, after all, a woman navigating a world that was not designed for her success. Her reign was a testament to resilience, ingenuity, and the power of narrative. She understood that history is as much about perception as it is about reality, a lesson that remains relevant today. So what does it mean to rule like a pharaoh? Perhaps it's about more than wielding power. It's about crafting a legacy that endures. It's not enough to build monuments. One must also build narratives that withstand the test of time. It's about understanding that true power lies not in domination, but in the ability to inspire and transform. Hatshepsut's reign was a masterclass in these principles, and her story serves as a powerful reminder that history is not a static record. but a dynamic interplay of stories waiting to be told. As we close the book on Hatshepsut's saga, let's carry forward her spirit of defiance and innovation. Let's continue to question the narratives we're given and strive to write our own, embracing the complexities and contradictions that make history and life so endlessly fascinating. After all, if there's one thing Hatshepsut taught us, it's that the stories we leave behind are the truest measure of our legacy. So here's to the Pharaoh who dared to defy tradition, and in doing so, left an indelible mark on history. Long may her story inspire us to think big, act boldly, and above all, never stop questioning. In the dusty corridors of ancient China's memory, there stands a figure, a man, a myth, or possibly just an idea sketched out over a few cups of rice wine. This figure is Laozi, the supposed father of Daoism, a philosophy that's all about going with the flow. But let's not get carried away on a gentle breeze of romanticism just yet. There's a lot to unpack here. First off, Laozi, whose name literally means old master, is said to have graced the 6th century BCE with his wisdom. If he actually existed, and this is a big if, he was kind of like the ancient Chinese version of a librarian. Picture him in the imperial archives, surrounded by scrolls, probably trying to shush Confucius while pondering the mysteries of the cosmos. It's claimed he was the keeper of the records for the Zhou court, where he likely spent his days meticulously noting down things like rice yields and royal decrees. Not quite the glamorous life of enigmatic sages, but hey, someone's got to keep the bureaucracy rolling. Now, here's where things get a bit wild, like a scroll unraveling in a gust of wind. Legend has it that Laozi, tired of the corrupt and chaotic world, because, you know, some things never change, decided to check out civilization entirely, but not before he penned the Tao Te Ching, a text of just around 5,000 characters that would become the cornerstone of Taoist thought. Talk about a mic drop. But wait, it gets better. Laozi didn't just casually walk out into the wilderness. No, he chose a grand exit befitting a rock star of philosophy, riding a water buffalo. Yes, you heard that right. Forget the horse or camel. Laozi opted for a creature that's basically a four-legged metaphor for doing things at your own pace. As he ambled westward, he supposedly hit the Hangu Pass, where a gatekeeper, clearly recognizing something special about this old guy on a buffalo, asked him to share his wisdom before he vanished into the ether. Thus, the Tao Te Ching was born, or so the story goes. Now, let's pause for a moment and consider the plausibility of all this. Was Laozi a real person, or just the ancient Chinese equivalent of a superhero cooked up by committee? Historians have scratched their heads over this for centuries. Some suggest he might never have existed at all, while others think he was an amalgamation of various wise old men whose sayings got stitched together over time. Kind of like the philosophical version of a band's greatest hits album, but without the tour dates. Here's the thing. Whether Laozi was flesh and blood, or just an idealized figure, the impact of the Tao Te Ching is indisputable. It's a text that's been translated more times than a pop song, and has influenced everyone from emperors to tech CEOs looking for their next big idea. It's all about balance, harmony, and understanding the flow of the universe, a refreshing break from the often rigid and prescriptive philosophies of the time. And it's this flexibility, this go-with-the-flow mentality, that has kept Taoism relevant for over 2 millennia. In a world where information was scratched onto bamboo strips and carried long distances by people with sandals, the staying power of Laozi's ideas is nothing short of miraculous. But let's not forget, the idea of a wise old sage riding a water buffalo into the sunset is just too good a story to pass up. It's precisely the kind of imagery that sticks in the collective memory, whether or not it's true. And so, Laozi, or the idea of Laozi, has endured. Whether he was a real person or a composite sketch with a flair for dramatic exits, his legacy is as real as the ink on the pages of the Tao Te Ching. Sure, he might never have existed, but his supposed thoughts have shaped cultures, philosophies, and even the modern-day mindfulness movement. So next time you're sitting in traffic or trying to find your own life balance, remember, somewhere out there, Laozi, or the idea of him, is still riding that water buffalo, taking things one slow, deliberate step at a time. And while Laozi, or the idea of him, might still be on that leisurely water buffalo ride, let's dive into the juicy core of Taoism. the real stuff that makes it more than just a nice tale to tell over a cup of tea. Enter Daoism's greatest hits, Wu Wei and Zuren. Now, Wu Wei, often translated as effortless action, might sound like the kind of philosophy tailor-made for anyone who's ever hit snooze on their alarm one too many times. It's the art of doing by not doing, a paradox that would give even the most ardent procrastinator pause for thought. Imagine a philosophy that says, hey, maybe just let things happen. Sounds like a lazy teenager's dream, right? But hold your horses, or water buffaloes, because there's more depth here than a mere excuse to binge-watch TV shows. Wu Wei is about finding the path of least resistance, going with the natural flow of things, like a leaf floating effortlessly down a stream. Sure, it might seem like a cop-out to those who thrive on to-do lists and productivity apps, but Wu Wei has this uncanny knack for getting things done in a way that feels almost magical. Think about it. Sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to step back and let it unravel itself. Then there's Zuren, which translates to naturalness, or self-so. It's like Wu Wei's laid-back cousin, advocating for authenticity and spontaneity. Zuren is about being true to oneself and rolling with what nature intended, a concept that might make your inner control freak break out in hives. But in a world obsessed with control and precision, Zuren insists on the beauty of the unplanned and the unpolished. If Wu Wei is the art of doing nothing, Zuren is the art of being true to yourself while doing it. Now, let's take a detour down Confucian Lane. While Laozi, or the legend of him, was all about harmony and flow, Confucius was sitting in the opposite corner with his well-organized files of rules and rituals. Confucianism, the brainchild of Confucius, a real person with a penchant for structure, was all about duty, hierarchy, and the social contract. If Daoism is the free-spirited artist, Confucianism is the diligent office worker clocking in at 9 a.m. sharp. Confucius's ideas were like a social playbook. Respect your elders, follow the rules, and keep society ticking along like a well-oiled machine. But here's the kicker. While Confucianism might look like the teacher's pet with its emphasis on order, Daoism was that cool kid in the back of the class doodling in the margins, whispering about a different way to live. Where Confucianism saw society as a series of obligations, Daoism saw it as an opportunity to blend in with the natural rhythms of the universe. It was less about checking boxes and more about finding your groove. Economically, this philosophical tug-of-war had real-world consequences. During the Han Dynasty, for instance, Confucianism was embraced as the state philosophy, with its focus on social harmony and hierarchy playing well to an empire that needed order to function. But the Taoist undercurrent never quite disappeared, offering a philosophical safety valve for those who found Confucian rigidity a bit too much like a straitjacket. When the bureaucracy got too stifling, folks could turn to Taoism for a breath of fresh air, literally and metaphorically. And let's not forget the political implications. In a time when emperors were trying to align themselves with cosmic forces to legitimize their rule, the Taoist idea of harmony with the cosmos was a powerful tool. It was like saying, hey, I'm not just your ruler because of my family tree. I'm practically in sync with the universe itself. This cosmic alignment gave rulers a kind of divine mandate, making Taoism not just a personal philosophy, but a political strategy. But don't get too cozy with this idyllic picture of Taoism as the peaceful underdog. Like any major philosophy, it had its complexities and contradictions. Take the Taoist alchemists, for example, who were obsessed with achieving immortality. They were the ancient equivalent of biohackers, experimenting with concoctions that would make a modern chemist cringe. In their quest for eternal life, they sometimes stumbled upon real scientific advancements, but more often than not, they ended up with a deadly cocktail. Talk about living on the edge. So, while Taoism might sound like a dream philosophy for the laid-back and the lazy, it's anything but simple. It's a philosophy that's influenced politics, science, and culture, and continues to do so to this day. Whether you're a CEO looking for balance, a student searching for meaning, or just someone trying to navigate the chaos of life, Taoism offers a perspective that's as relevant now as it was in Laozi's, or the idea of Laozi's, time. As we meander like a stream through this vast landscape of ideas, remember, the Tao Te Ching, with its cryptic verses and profound insights, isn't just a relic of the past. It's a living document, a guide to navigating the complexities of life with a little less stress and a lot more harmony. And who wouldn't want that in a world that seems to spin faster every day? But before we drift too far down this philosophical river, let's pause. There's much more to explore in the world of Daoism, from its mystical elements to its impact on art and culture. So, keep that water buffalo in your mind's eye and get ready for the next leg of this journey. Tale of Daoism is far from over, and we've only just begun to scratch the surface. And so, with the image of Laozi warbling gently on his water buffalo etched in our minds, let's fast forward a few centuries to the Tang dynasty, where Daoism really hit its stride. You see, what started as a laid-back philosophy for those tired of Confucian rigidity evolved into a powerhouse of cultural influence. By the time the Tang emperors were flexing their imperial muscles, Daoism had snagged the coveted status of state religion. It was like Daoism went from being the cool indie band in the philosophical lineup to headlining the biggest festival in town. Now, why would the Tang emperors, those grand puppeteers of the 7th to 10th centuries, roll out the red carpet for Daoism? The answer isn't as mystical as you might think. Sure, there's that enchanting idea of cosmic harmony, but there's more to it. For one, aligning with Daoism was a savvy political move, like partnering with a hot new tech startup. By promoting Daoism, emperors could claim a divine endorsement. Hey, my rule is in sync with the universe. How about yours? Which is a surefire way to keep the throne a little longer when every uncle and cousin is eyeing it. But let's not ignore the economic undertones. The Tang dynasty wasn't just about poetry and porcelain. It was also about cold, hard cash. Taoist monasteries were often granted tax exemptions, making them economically attractive. Plus, the Taoist clergy weren't just spiritual guides. They were also landlords and business operators, managing lands and resources that contributed to the imperial coffers. This symbiotic relationship between the state and Taoism was less about chanting and more about chart-ching. Enter the Taoist alchemists, the real-life wizards of the Chinese Middle Ages. These guys were the original mad scientists, dabbling in concoctions and elixirs that promised eternal life. Their laboratories were the ancient equivalent of a high-stakes chemistry set, with results that ranged from groundbreaking to downright explosive. Literally, alchemists were mixing all sorts of ingredients, trying to crack the code of immortality. Spoiler alert. They often ended up with more bang than they bargained for, sometimes blowing up their labs and themselves in the process. But let's give credit where it's due. These alchemists weren't just chasing immortality. They were inadvertently laying the groundwork for future scientific advancements. The quest for the elixir of life led to significant developments in chemistry and medicine. Sulfur and saltpeter, common components in their experiments, eventually paved the way to the creation of gunpowder, a discovery that would change warfare forever. Who would have thought that the pursuit of living forever could lead to something as explosive as gunpowder? Talk about irony. Now, while Taoist alchemists were busy playing with fire, the emperors were playing their own game of celestial chess. The Tang rulers were nothing if not pragmatic, and embracing Taoism allowed them to navigate the complex web of religion and politics. By promoting Taoism, they could effectively counterbalance the influence of Buddhism, which was also gaining ground in China at the time. It was a delicate dance, a bit like balancing your spiritual portfolio with just the right mix of stocks and bonds. And let's not forget the allure of Taoist rituals, which were a spectacle in themselves. These ceremonies, with their elaborate rites and mystical chants, were the medieval equivalent of a blockbuster movie, full of special effects and awe-inspiring moments. They offered a sense of connection to the divine that was both personal and communal, a way for emperors to demonstrate their piety and for the people to feel part of something greater. It was spiritual theater at its finest, and who doesn't love a good show? But behind all the pomp and circumstance, there lurked a gritty reality. Immortality, despite the best efforts of Taoist alchemists, remained elusive. Instead, what persisted was the idea of spiritual immortality, a concept that offered solace and meaning in an uncertain world. This belief in the transcendence of the soul was a powerful motivator, encouraging people to live in harmony with the Tao and align themselves with the natural order of the universe. It wasn't about living forever in the flesh, but about becoming one with the eternal flow of the cosmos. As Taoism spread and evolved, it left indelible marks on Chinese culture. Its influence can be seen in the art, literature, and even the administrative practices of the time. The Taoist aesthetic, with its emphasis on natural beauty and simplicity, inspired countless poets and painters to capture the essence of the world around them. The famous Tang poet Lai Bai, who often wrote about the joys of wine and the beauty of nature, was deeply influenced by Taoist thought. His poems, like the Taoist philosophy itself, are a celebration of life's fleeting moments and the tranquility of the natural world. But let's not get too misty-eyed. As with any movement that achieves power and influence, Taoism wasn't immune to internal strife and corruption. As the state religion, it faced challenges from within and without, as various sects vied for influence and legitimacy. The Taoist clergy, once humble seekers of the truth, sometimes became entangled in the very power dynamics they sought to transcend. It's a tale as old as time. Give someone a little power, and suddenly, enlightenment takes a backseat to politics. All this is to say that the story of Taoism during the Tang dynasty is one of complexity and contradiction. It's a saga of spiritual ideals clashing with earthly ambitions, of alchemists striving for immortality and emperors seeking legitimacy. It's a reminder that history is never as simple as it seems, that beneath the surface of every great movement lies a tangled web of motivations and agendas. So, as we wrap up this leg of our journey through the history of Taoism, let's keep things in perspective. Taoism's rise to prominence in the Tang dynasty wasn't just about philosophy or religion. It was about power, politics, and the perpetual human quest for meaning. While the Taoist alchemists might not have cracked the code of immortality, they left a legacy of inquiry and experimentation that echoes through the ages. As we meander onward, remember that the Taoist path is one of exploration and paradox, of seeking truth amid the chaos of life. And while the Tang dynasty may have been the golden age of Taoism, the story didn't end there. There's much more to uncover, more myths to debunk, and more truths to reveal. So stay tuned, because the tale of Taoism is far from over, and we've only just begun to scratch the surface. And speaking of scratching the surface, let's dig into the fantastical tales that swirled around Taoism, those irresistible legends of immortals and magical lands that gave ancient China its own brand of mythological mystique. If the Taoist philosophy was the indie darling of ancient worldviews, then its mythical aspects were the blockbuster sequels, complete with their own merchandise line. Picture this. You're living in a time when life expectancy barely stretched past 40, and the world was one big unknown. Wouldn't you latch onto stories of immortals who'd cracked the secret code to eternal life like it was the latest Marvel movie? These tales of celestial beings, unaffected by the passage of time, played into the human desire for escape and transcendence. They were the stuff of dreams and smart politics. Let's start with Pinglai, a fabled island paradise said to be home to the 8 immortals, a group of Taoist deities who had mastered the art of not dying. Imagine Shangri-La with a Taoist twist, lush landscapes, fruits that granted eternal life, and a vibe that screamed vacation of the millennium. The appeal was obvious. In a world of hardship, Pinglai was the ultimate carrot on a stick, promising that if you just aligned yourself with the Tao, you too could one day sip immortal cocktails with the cool kids. But these legends weren't just whimsical fables. They were political gold. Emperors and rulers used them to legitimize their reigns, claiming divine favor by associating themselves with these legendary figures. It was like saying, "See, I'm endorsed by the celestial A-list." During the Han dynasty, for instance, the Emperor Wu of Han dispatched an expedition to find Pinglai, hoping to secure the elixir of life. Spoiler, they didn't find it, but the search itself was a brilliant PR move, reinforcing the Emperor's connection to the divine. The immortals themselves were colorful characters, each with their own backstory and special powers. Take Zhangli Quan, often depicted with a bare belly and a fan that could resurrect the dead, or Lu Dongbin, a scholarly type who carried a sword to slay dragons and demons, like a Taoist Indiana Jones. Their stories were a mix of morality tales and adventure yarns, capturing the imagination and offering moral lessons wrapped in entertainment. It's no wonder these figures became the ancient equivalent of action figures, their likenesses found in everything from paintings to pottery. But let's not get swept away by the romance of it all. These myths, while enchanting, also fueled a commercial machine. Taoism became a brand, its mystical elements exaggerated and sold like hotcakes. Temples and monasteries capitalized on the allure of these legends, offering blessings, talismans, and rituals for a price. It was a spiritual marketplace, where faith met commerce in a way that would make even the most seasoned marketers take notes. Take the concept of fu, or talismanic charms, which were thought to bring good luck and ward off evil. These were the Taoist equivalent of a magic amulet, each inscribed with cryptic symbols and sold to believers seeking a slice of celestial protection. The price tag, often hefty, but worth it for those hoping to sway fate in their favor. Temples became bustling hubs of spiritual commerce, where the line between devotion and consumerism blurred like ink on rice paper. And while we're talking about consumerism, let's not overlook the economic implications. Taoist rituals and festivals were big business, drawing crowds and filling coffers. The celebration of Taoist festivals, like the birthday of the Jade Emperor, believed to be the ruler of heaven, were events of grand spectacle. These occasions weren't just religious observances. They were community extravaganzas, complete with offerings, entertainment, and the kind of fanfare that kept local economies buzzing. These events also reinforced social order. By participating in temple activities, people weren't just indulging in spiritual practices. They were reaffirming their place in a cosmic hierarchy. The temples themselves, often lavishly adorned, were architectural statements of power, showcasing the wealth and influence of the Taoist clergy. It was a clever blend of spiritual aspiration and social stratification, with the temple as both a spiritual refuge and a status symbol. Yet, despite all this commercialization, the mystical allure of Taoism never fully lost its essence. The legends of immortals and magical lands continued to captivate, offering a glimpse of a world where the boundaries of reality could be bent and reshaped. They served as a reminder of the Taoist belief in the interconnectedness of all things and the possibility of transcending the mundane. In the end, these stories were more than just escapist fantasies. They were reflections of human hopes and fears, aspirations and anxieties. They showed how Taoism, with its rich tapestry of myth and philosophy, could be both a deeply personal journey and a communal experience. Whether you were a humble farmer seeking protection or an emperor coveting immortality, the legends of Taoism offered something for everyone, weaving a narrative that was as multifaceted as life itself. So, as we continue our exploration of Taoism, keep an eye out for those shimmering threads of myth and reality. They remind us that history isn't just a series of dry facts, but a living story, filled with dreams and desires that echo through the centuries. And while we might not find Pinglai on any map, the quest for meaning and transcendence is a journey that's as timeless as the Tao itself. And speaking of journeys, our exploration isn't over yet. We've got more myths to unravel, more truths to uncover, and more insights to share. So stick around, because the story of Taoism is far from finished, and there's plenty more to discover. So, let's bring our journey into the present, where the echoes of Taoism resonate in surprising and sometimes spectacular ways. You see, the influence of Taoist philosophy didn't just pack up and retire after a few centuries of headlining ancient China's spiritual scene. No, Taoism slipped on a pair of modern sneakers and kept pace with history, touching the realms of martial arts, traditional Chinese medicine, and even the glitzy stage of global pop culture. Talk about range. Let's start with martial arts. Taoism and martial arts go together like peanut butter and jelly, if peanut butter could knock you flat with a roundhouse kick. Ever heard of Tai Chi? That slow, flowing exercise, beloved by everyone from ancient soldiers to your local park's morning crowd. It's practically a Taoist manifesto in motion. Born out of the principles of balance and harmony, Tai Chi embodies the Taoist belief in yielding over brute force. The idea that sometimes the best offense is a good defense, or better yet, no offense at all. It's martial arts with a philosophical twist, where the goal isn't just to win a fight, but to cultivate inner peace and health. Now that's what I call a double whammy. Traditional Chinese medicine, another Taoist offspring, takes this balance concept and runs with it, straight into the doctor's office. Rooted in the idea that health comes from harmony within the body and with the world, it's less about popping pills and more about aligning your Kai, or life force. Acupuncture, herbal remedies, and Tai Chi are all part of this holistic approach, treating the body as a whole rather than just a collection of parts. It's a philosophy that's gaining traction globally as more people seek alternatives to the high-stress, high-cost world of modern healthcare. And who can blame them? After all, a little less stress and a little more balance sounds pretty appealing when your calendar looks like a Picasso painting of chaos. But Daoism didn't stop at the borders of China or the edges of science. Nope, it spread its wings and flew right into the heart of pop culture. Movies, books, and even video games have all caught the Taoist bug, weaving its themes into narratives that captivate audiences worldwide. Remember, Star Wars. While George Lucas didn't exactly name-drop Laozi in his scripts, the concept of the Force bears a striking resemblance to the Tao, an invisible flow that connects and sustains all life. It's the kind of mystical science fiction blend that would make a Taoist sage nod in understanding while sipping his tea. Then there's the gaming world, where titles like Journey to the West and Tao Feng, Fist of the Lotus, draw on Taoist legends and philosophies to create immersive adventures. These games don't just entertain, they introduce players to concepts of balance, harmony, and the cyclical nature of life and death, albeit with a few more virtual explosions than Laozi might have anticipated. But why does Taoism still matter in today's world, where the pace of life makes even Laozi's water buffalo look like a race car? Well, in an era of constant connectivity and relentless hustle, Taoism offers a breath of fresh air, or perhaps more fittingly, a gentle breeze. The idea of wu-wei, or effortless action, is a compelling antidote to the stress of modern life. Imagine a philosophy that suggests maybe, just maybe, success doesn't have to come from grinding yourself into the ground. It's a radical notion in a world obsessed with productivity, but one that resonates with anyone who's felt the sting of burnout. And let's not overlook Zuren, the Taoist principle of naturalness and spontaneity. In a world obsessed with filters and curated perfection, embracing one's true self can feel like a revolutionary act. Taoism encourages us to strip away the layers of pretense and live in harmony with our true nature, blemishes and all. It's a call to authenticity in a sea of artificiality, a reminder that there's beauty in the unplanned and the imperfect. But here's the kicker. The romance of Taoism, with its mythical origins and enigmatic sages, continues to captivate because it offers both a mystery and a map. It's a philosophy that invites us to question the status quo, to find peace in the chaos, and to embrace the journey rather than just the destination. And in a world where change is the only constant, that's a pretty timeless message. So as we wrap up our exploration of Taoism, consider this. In a universe that often feels like it's spinning out of control, maybe the secret isn't to hold on tighter, but to let go a little. To flow with the Tao, to find balance in the midst of imbalance, and to trust that sometimes the best way forward is to simply be. Whether you're navigating the complexities of the modern world, or just trying to find a moment of peace in your day, the lessons of Taoism offer a gentle reminder that life is a journey best traveled with an open heart and a curious mind. And with that, we leave Laozi, or the idea of him, riding off into the sunset on his water buffalo, a symbol of serenity in a world that's anything but. As you go about your day, keep a bit of that Taoist spirit with you. Who knows, it might just be the key to unlocking a bit of balance in your own life. Until next time, stay curious, stay balanced, and remember, even in chaos, there's order if you know where to look. In the bustling heart of ancient Carthage, where the air was thick with the scent of spices and ambition, a young boy named Hannibal was making a promise that would set the course of history. At the tender age of 9, when most kids today are busy deciding between mac and cheese or chicken nuggets, Hannibal was vowing eternal enmity against Rome. Talk about setting the bar high for childhood goals. This wasn't just some kid's rebellious phase. Mind you, this was a solemn oath taken in front of his father, Hamilcar Barca, a man who had been giving Rome a serious headache during the First Punic War. Hamilcar, seeing the potential in his son, decided to pass on his own grudge like a family heirloom. "Swear you will never be a friend to Rome," he told Hannibal, who, presumably with all the seriousness his 9-year-old self could muster, agreed. Thus began a lifelong vendetta that would make even the Hatfields and McCoys look like a friendly neighborhood spat. Now, let's set the scene for you. Carthage was no small player in the Mediterranean game. Picture a sprawling empire that stretched across North Africa and into parts of Spain, with a knack for trade and a love for the sea. They were the Elon Musks of the ancient world, always looking for the next big thing, except instead of space travel, they were more into conquering lands and establishing trade routes. The rivalry with Rome was kind of like an ancient version of a corporate takeover battle. Rome and Carthage were vying for control over Sicily, which was the ancient equivalent of the prime real estate everyone wanted. The First Punic War had raged for 23 years, from 264 to 241 BC, with Rome eventually emerging victorious. Carthage had to cough up a hefty indemnity of 200 talents. That's a whopping 80,000 pounds of silver, or the GDP of a small nation back then, and lost its foothold on Sicily. Ouch. But Carthage, being the resilient merchant powerhouse it was, didn't wallow in defeat. Instead, they shifted their focus to Spain, where rich silver mines promised to restore their fortunes. Enter Hamilcar Barca, who headed to the Iberian Peninsula with young Hannibal in tow to build a new Carthaginian empire. It was a bold move, considering that this was essentially a giant middle finger to Rome, who had their eyes on Spain too. Hannibal grew up in this climate of political intrigue and militaristic fervor, learning the ropes of leadership and strategy from some of the best minds of the time. He wasn't just a military prodigy. He was a sponge, soaking up the harsh realities of ancient geopolitics. And let's face it, learning the art of war in the rugged terrains of Spain was a bit more intense than a typical semester abroad. The political scene in Carthage was a complex web of competing interests and power plays. Unlike Rome, which had a more centralized system, Carthage was a republic where a group of wealthy elite families called the 104 held sway. This oligarchic council was all about the Benjamins, or, well, the denarii, and they weren't too keen on military adventures that didn't promise a good return on investment. But Hamilcar, and later his son Hannibal, knew that to protect Carthage's interests, they had to play the long game with Rome. They understood that military might was just one part of the equation. Economic strength, shrewd diplomacy, and a bit of good old-fashioned cunning were equally critical. This was a chess game on the grandest scale, where each move could mean the difference between empire and oblivion. The traditions of Carthage, steeped in maritime prowess and mercantile savvy, shaped Hannibal into a leader who could think on his feet. Carthaginians were known for hiring mercenaries to bolster their ranks, a practice that Hannibal would later perfect in his campaigns. It was a practical move. Why train your own army when you can hire someone else's? This also meant that Hannibal had to be a master diplomat, capable of uniting a motley crew of soldiers under a single banner. In many ways, Hannibal's early life was a perfect storm of influences. He had a front-row seat to the political machinations of Carthage, the military strategies of his father, and the economic realities of an empire in recovery. All of these elements brewed together to create one of the most formidable military leaders in history. And yet, at the heart of it all was that childhood oath, a simple promise that would drive him to become Rome's worst nightmare. So next time you think about the pressures of growing up, spare a thought for young Hannibal. He wasn't just planning for the school talent show. He was preparing to shake the very foundations of the ancient world. With an oath, a father's legacy, and a burning desire to outsmart Rome, he embarked on a journey that would leave an indelible mark on history. Who knew a 9-year-old's promise could carry so much weight? Hannibal, with that youthful promise still burning in his mind, was about to undertake a daring maneuver that would cement his place in military legend. It's 218 BC, and the stage is set for one of the most audacious military stunts in history, the crossing of the Alps. Now, I'm not talking about a leisurely hike here. This was the ancient equivalent of deciding to move your entire office setup, including the water cooler and potted plant, across the Himalayas on foot, with elephants. In winter, talk about taking the scenic route. Let's start with some cold, hard logistics. Hannibal's march was no small feat. He was leading around 50,000 infantry, 9,000 cavalry, and about 37 war elephants. Yes, you heard that right. Elephants, not exactly your typical mountain climbing companions. The idea of these majestic beasts lumbering over icy peaks has captivated imaginations for centuries, but here's where we need to pump the brakes on the romanticism. The Alps weren't some picturesque backdrop for a National Geographic special. They were a formidable barrier, with treacherous paths, unpredictable weather, and hostile tribes who were about as welcoming as a pack of hungry wolves. So why? You might ask, did Hannibal decide to go all in on this seemingly impassable journey? Well, for one, he was looking to catch the Romans off guard. They never expected an invasion from the north, and Hannibal aimed to exploit that element of surprise. Plus, the man had a flair for the dramatic. He wasn't just a soldier, he was a showman, and nothing screams, "Look at me." Quite like leading an army through the Alps. Now, onto the elephants. The pachyderms have become the stuff of legend, but let's not kid ourselves. They were a logistical nightmare. We're talking about animals that can eat up to 300 pounds of food a day. And guess what the Alps are famously short on? Elephant-sized salad bars. The truth is, Hannibal's elephants were more about psychological warfare than practical utility. Imagine being a Roman soldier, expecting a typical skirmish, and suddenly seeing these massive creatures charging down at you. It was like bringing a tank to a knife fight. But the journey was anything but a smooth ride. Hannibal's forces endured landslides, avalanches, and attacks from local tribes who were none too pleased about this unwelcome parade marching through their backyard. The trek took over 2 weeks, with the army losing nearly half of its men to the harsh conditions before they even got to face the Romans. That's not to mention the morale-crushing realities of frostbite, starvation, and fatigue. This was no heroic march. It was a grueling test of endurance and leadership. And yet, despite these monumental challenges, Hannibal emerged on the Italian side of the Alps ready for battle. It was a testament to his leadership, charisma, and sheer force of will. He knew how to motivate his men, and that's not just by promising them glory and loot. He was in the trenches with them, suffering the same hardships, which earned him their unwavering loyalty. It's easy to see why he was able to keep his army together against all odds. This was more than just a military campaign. It was a testament to human determination and ingenuity. Let's not leave out the economic angle here. The cost of equipping and maintaining an army of this size was astronomical. Carthage was essentially betting the farm on Hannibal's success. They needed a win, and they needed it fast. The crossing wasn't just about tactics. It was a calculated economic gamble. Hannibal was like a high-stakes gambler, pushing all his chips to the center of the table with this one bold move. The Romans, sitting pretty with their superior numbers and resources, were in for a rude awakening. In the end, Hannibal's crossing of the Alps was more than just a military maneuver. It was a statement. It said, "We're not done yet, Rome." And while the Romans were busy picking their jaws off the floor, Hannibal was setting the stage for his next big act. The crossing shattered expectations and set a new standard for military audacity. It was the ultimate power move, one that would echo through history as a testament to what sheer determination and a bit of madness can achieve. So, when you picture Hannibal staring down those icy peaks, remember it wasn't just elephants and epic battles. It was a young man with a promise, an empire with everything at stake, and a plan so crazy it just might work. Stay tuned, because the story of Hannibal is far from over. His next moves would push the ancient world to its limits and test the resolve of Rome like never before. As Hannibal and his men shook off the frost of the Alps, they were about to deliver a historical curveball that would leave Rome staggered like a boxer caught with a sucker punch. Enter the Battle of Cannae in 216 BC, a military symphony conducted with cunning and precision that would make even the most seasoned generals tip their helmets in respect. Now, let's get down to brass tacks. The Roman Republic, with its bulging military muscles, fielded a formidable force at Cannae, an army of about 86,000 strong. To put that in perspective, it was like bringing the entire population of a small city to a battle. This included their seasoned legions, auxiliary troops, and a cavalry that could give any horse lover serious envy. Rome's strategy, a straightforward frontal assault that had worked wonders in the past. Why fix what ain't broke right? Well, Hannibal was about to show them why. Hannibal, on the other hand, was playing a different game entirely. With only about 50,000 troops, he was outnumbered, but certainly not outwitted. His army was a patchwork of diverse units: Libyan infantry, Numidian cavalry, and those trusty Iberian swordsmen, to name a few. This eclectic mix was like a military United Nations, and Hannibal was the master diplomat holding it all together. His strategy at Cannae: envelopment. Picture this. The Carthaginian line was deliberately set in a convex formation, with Hannibal himself at the center, cool as a cucumber. As the Romans charged forward, Hannibal's forces slowly gave ground, bending inward into a crescent. This was not a retreat, my friends. It was a trap. Bit by bit, as the Romans pressed, they found themselves surrounded on three sides, a tactical move that had Hannibal's fingerprints all over it. But let's not forget the psychological warfare at play here. Hannibal knew the Romans were aching for revenge after previous skirmishes, and he played on their overconfidence like a maestro. The Roman legions, used to ploughing through enemies like a hot knife through butter, found themselves in a classic oh no moment as Hannibal's forces closed in from all sides. It was the ancient equivalent of being caught in a pincer movement, with the added twist of a psychological rug pull. The resulting chaos was nothing short of catastrophic for Rome. Estimates suggest that the Roman casualties were eye-watering, around 50, 000 to 70. 000 men fell in a single day. That's not just a defeat, that's a decimation. The Romans were left reeling, their legions reduced to a shadow of their former glory. It was a disaster so profound that it would haunt Roman military thinking for centuries. Now, let's take a step back and look at the economics of war. For Carthage, this victory was a gold mine, both literally and figuratively. The spoils of war, from weapons to armor, were a boon to Hannibal's army, which was always on the lookout for resources. War isn't just fought on the battlefield, it's fought in the coffers too, and Hannibal understood this better than most. Cannae wasn't just a military triumph, it was an economic windfall that kept his campaign rolling. But before we go all in on the romance of Hannibal as the ultimate military genius, let's pump the brakes. The reality was far starker. The victory at Cannae, while brilliant, didn't translate into a strategic advantage in the long run. Rome, like a stubborn weed, was not so easily uprooted. Their losses, though devastating, weren't a death knell. The Romans, with their legendary resilience, regrouped and adapted, learning from their mistakes with a tenacity that's downright admirable. Moreover, for all his tactical brilliance, Hannibal's position in Italy was precarious. He was deep in enemy territory, far from Carthage, with supply lines stretched thinner than a piece of parchment. His army, though victorious, was weary, and reinforcements were not exactly pouring in from Carthage, whose leaders were more interested in counting coins than sending more troops. And here's the kicker. Rome's political and social fabric was robust. After Cannae, instead of descending into chaos, the Roman Senate doubled down on their war efforts, rallying the citizens with a resolve that was nothing short of extraordinary. They even resorted to unconventional measures like arming slaves, proving that desperation is indeed the mother of invention. Hannibal, meanwhile, was left to ponder his next move. He had delivered a masterclass at Cannae, but the Romans weren't playing by the script. They refused to negotiate, refused to bow. Instead, they regrouped, rebuilt, and readied for the next round. It was a classic case of an unstoppable force meeting an immovable object. So, as we close this chapter on Cannae, let's remember that it was more than just a battle. It was a clash of ideologies, a testament to human ingenuity, and a reminder that sometimes even the most brilliant victories can lead to unexpected challenges. Hannibal's story was far from over, and Rome was gearing up for Act 2. Stay tuned, because this ancient saga is only just heating up. As Hannibal contemplated his next move post-Cannae, the Romans were busy rewriting the rulebook on resilience. The Romans were like that annoying kid in dodgeball who just won't stay down, no matter how many times you think you've got them pegged. They were regrouping, learning from their mistakes with the kind of determination you usually only see when someone's trying to assemble IKEA furniture without the instructions. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Hannibal's victory at Cannae was a seismic event, shaking Roman confidence to its core. Yet capturing Rome, that was an entirely different beast. You see, the Eternal City wasn't just a place. It was an idea that had been fortified with walls, legions, and a stubbornness that was practically an art form. Hannibal, for all his military genius, faced a series of hurdles that even he couldn't leap over. First off, there was the issue of logistics. His army, though formidable, was operating far from home. Supplies were scarce, and unlike a modern-day road trip, there weren't any conveniently located rest stops for refueling. The supply lines from Carthage stretched thinner than a Roman senator's patience after a long Senate session. Hannibal was essentially trying to feed an army in a land that was none too welcoming. Enter the Carthaginian Senate, or as Hannibal might have thought of them, the world's least helpful cheerleaders. Back in Carthage, the Senate was more focused on their balance sheets than battlefields. They were the kind of folks who'd rather count coins than send reinforcements, treating Hannibal's campaign like a risky Stark investment rather than a military necessity. They were hesitant to commit more resources, fearing a repeat of the First Punic War's costly aftermath. Hannibal was like a startup founder pitching to investors who just didn't get his vision. This lack of support left Hannibal in a bind. He needed more troops, more supplies, and perhaps a bit more moral support, but the Senate wasn't exactly opening the purse strings. In their defense, Carthage was a trading empire first and foremost. War was expensive, and with Rome's naval dominance, Carthage trade routes were under constant threat. The Senate was playing it safe, hedging their bets, and leaving Hannibal to fight with what he had. Then there was the small matter of Rome's allies. Despite the hammering at Cannae, Rome's network of alliances held firm. Many of Rome's allies, bound by treaties and a fair bit of Roman muscle, remained loyal. Hannibal had hoped that Italian cities would rise in revolt, throwing off the Roman yoke and joining his cause. Some did, but not nearly enough to tip the scales. The Roman knack for diplomacy or intimidation, depending on how you look at it, was paying dividends. Meanwhile, Roman strategy was evolving. Instead of engaging Hannibal in open battle, they turned to a strategy of attrition. They avoided direct confrontation, opting instead to cut off his supply lines and harass his forces. The Romans were playing the long game, wearing down Hannibal's army with 1,000 small cuts rather than one decisive blow. It was less gladiator showdown and more death by 1,000 paper cuts. This war of attrition was not just a military strategy. It was a financial one. Rome could afford to bide its time. With its vast resources and manpower, Rome was playing a waiting game, betting that Hannibal's campaign would eventually run out of steam. And with each passing month, Hannibal's resources were indeed dwindling. His army was formidable but not invincible, and the Romans were determined to outlast him. The economic realities were biting hard. Hannibal couldn't just waltz into Rome and declare victory. He needed a win that would bring the Senate to its knees, and Cannae, though devastating, wasn't enough. Rome was a juggernaut, and while Hannibal could land blows, bringing it down required more than tactical brilliance. It required overwhelming resources and support that just weren't forthcoming. And so, the legend of Hannibal, the military genius who crossed the Alps and humbled Rome, was tempered by harsh realities. Despite his victories, his campaign was becoming a marathon with no finish line in sight. Hannibal was running a race against time, resources, and the unyielding Roman spirit. The dream of capturing Rome was slipping through his fingers like sand, even as he stood on the brink of history. Hannibal's Italian campaign, once a daring venture that promised glory, was now a grind. For all the romance of his exploits, the reality was a relentless struggle against dwindling supplies and a lack of reinforcements. The Carthaginian Senate, with its eyes on the bottom line, was reluctant to gamble more on a campaign that, while audacious, seemed increasingly unsustainable. The myth of Hannibal as the great conqueror clashes with the realpolitik of his situation. This wasn't just a battle of armies. It was a battle of economies, strategies, and political will. And Rome, with its robust institutions and deep pockets, was proving to be a tougher nut to crack than anyone had anticipated. As Hannibal maneuvered through the Italian countryside, looking for a way to turn the tide, the Romans were not just rebuilding their legions, they were adapting. They were learning from their defeats, crafting new strategies, and crucially, holding their nerve. The Roman Senate wasn't about to let one bad day at Cannae dictate the fate of the Republic. Hannibal, for all his brilliance, was caught in a web of geopolitics and economic constraints. His Italian adventure was a testament to human ingenuity and determination, but it was also a reminder that even the greatest warriors need more than just skill to overcome entrenched power. Rome wasn't just a city. It was an idea fortified by determination, resources, and a strategic depth that Hannibal, for all his genius, couldn't quite crack. Stay tuned, because while Hannibal's campaign might be faltering, the story of this legendary tactician and the resilient Romans is far from over. The stage is set for another chapter in this epic clash, where the stakes are higher, the strategies more cunning, and the lessons of history more poignant than ever. So, with Hannibal's Italian escapades sputtering like an engine running on fumes, let's fast forward to the grand finale of our epic tale. Hannibal drifted around the Italian peninsula, for about 15 years, pulling off tactical wizardry that would make Sun Tzu nod in approval. But he never quite managed to land that knockout punch on Rome. The Romans, like a pesky weed, just kept coming back, and Hannibal's campaign ultimately turned into a grueling game of endurance. But here's the twist. While Hannibal was busily crafting his reputation as a military genius, the Roman chess masters were plotting their endgame. Enter Publius Cornelius Scipio, later grandiloquently known as Scipio Africanus, Rome's answer to Hannibal's brilliance. Scipio decided to play Hannibal at his own game and took the fight to Carthage's front door. It was a bold move, like challenging a shark to a swim-off in its own backyard. In 202 BC, the two titans clashed at the Battle of Zama in modern-day Tunisia. This was the ancient equivalent of a heavyweight championship bout, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. Scipio, armed with a battle strategy as sharp as a Roman gladius, outmaneuvered Hannibal, who was finally facing a foe that could match him in both wit and will. The battle was a raucous affair, with Hannibal fielding his own war elephants, hoping for a repeat of his earlier psychological warfare. But Scipio wasn't about to be trampled. He deftly opened lanes in his ranks, allowing the elephants to charge harmlessly through. Checkmate, Hannibal. As the dust settled on the African plains, Carthage was forced to its knees. The peace terms were brutal. Carthage had to cough up a whopping 10,000 talents of silver, about 270 tons, over 50 years, effectively bankrupting them and ensuring they would never again rise as a military power. Talk about adding salt to the wound. And what about Hannibal? Well, after his defeat, he slipped into the shadows, a bit like a rock star after the final encore. He bounced around the Mediterranean, offering his military expertise to various kings and occasionally stirring up trouble for Rome. But his glory days were behind him, and he met his end in 183 BC, reportedly taking poison to avoid capture by the ever-persistent Romans. Even in death, Hannibal was defiant, refusing to give his enemies the satisfaction of parading him as a trophy. Now, let's take a step back and examine the wreckage of Carthage. Rome, not content with just harboring its old rival, eventually decided to finish the job. In 146 BC, after the Third Punic War, Carthage was obliterated, razed to the ground in a final act of Roman ruthlessness. The city was so thoroughly destroyed that the Romans allegedly salted the earth to ensure nothing would grow there again. It was a mic-drop moment in ancient geopolitics, a brutal demonstration of Rome's willingness to rewrite the map when it suited them. Yet, despite Carthage's fiery end, Hannibal's influence would echo through history like a ghostly battle cry. His tactics, particularly his use of envelopment at Cannae, became a textbook example for future generals. The likes of Napoleon and even Robert E. Lee would study and admire his strategies, proving that while Carthage was erased, Hannibal's legacy was indelibly etched into the annals of military history. But let's not get swept away by the grandeur of it all. Hannibal's tale is also a cautionary one about the limits of genius and the harsh realities of power. His campaigns highlight the importance of logistics, the need for political savvy, and the fact that even the most brilliant tactics can flounder without support. Hannibal was, in many ways, a tragic hero, a man of immense talent undone by the very forces he sought to conquer. And what of Rome? The Romans, those relentless empire builders, emerged from the Punic Wars as the unchallenged masters of the Mediterranean. Their victory marked the beginning of a period of expansion that would eventually see the Roman Empire stretch from Britain to Egypt. Rome's ability to learn from its defeats and adapt was a key factor in its rise to power. They were the ultimate pragmatists, willing to change tactics, strategies, and even cultural practices if it meant maintaining their grip on power. In the end, Hannibal's story is a complex tapestry of ambition, brilliance, and ultimately, the crushing weight of reality. His legacy is both inspiring and sobering, a reminder of human potential and the limits imposed by circumstance. He was a man who dared to dream big, who turned the Mediterranean into his chessboard, and who, despite his failures, left a mark that has endured for over 2 millennia. So, as we close the book on this legendary tactician, let's remember Hannibal not just as the man who crossed the Alps with elephants, but as a symbol of the enduring struggle between genius and the gritty realities of power. His story is a testament to the fact that history is not just about heroes and villains, but about the complex interplay of ambition, strategy, and the relentless march of time. And who knows, perhaps somewhere, in the dusty archives of forgotten battles, Hannibal is still plotting his next move, forever a part of the grand game of history. The Eurasian steppe, vast, windswept, and seemingly endless, was once the playground of the Scythians, the original rock stars of the ancient trade scene. These folks were the kind of enigmatic nomads who could make even the most seasoned historians scratch their head in wonder. Known for their ferocity in battle and a penchant for gold that would put modern influencers to shame, the Scythians were more than just the stuff of ancient legends. They were the linchpins of a bustling trade network that stretched from Greece to China, all while rocking some seriously impressive tattoos and elaborate headgear. Talk about making an entrance. Now, if you think of nomads and picture a bunch of folks aimlessly roaming around, think again. The Scythians were strategic geniuses when it came to navigating the steppe. Their territory sprawled across what is today Ukraine, southern Russia, and Kazakhstan. Imagine the sheer logistics of managing a domain that size without GPS or Google Maps. Yet these guys made it work, and they did it on horseback, no less. Forget the minivan road trip. The Scythians were the original long-haul travelers, covering distances in the thousands of kilometers while keeping an eye on their most valuable commodity, their horses. These animals weren't just for show. They were the muscle behind the Scythian economy and a key component of their military might. Try pulling off a cavalry charge without one. Let's dive into the nitty-gritty of their trade routes. Imagine a network of dirt paths and trails stretching from the Black Sea all the way to the Altai Mountains. The Scythians weren't just gallivanting across this massive landscape for fun. They were moving goods, lots of them. We're talking about gold, spices, textiles, and even slaves. They traded with the Greeks, the Persians, and the Chinese, among others, and they did it with a level of finesse that would make any modern-day trader nod in approval. These routes were the ancient version of the Silk Road, except instead of trucks and trains, you had horse-drawn carts and wagons, and instead of customs checks, there were the occasional bandit raids. Talk about a travel hazard. The Scythians had a knack for turning the mundane into the extraordinary, and their lifestyle was no exception. While the Greeks and Romans loved to wax poetic about the Scythians as fearsome warriors, there was much more to their daily life than swinging swords and arrows. For starters, they were a society that valued craftsmanship. Scythian art was something to behold, intricate gold work that could rival any of the era's finest artisans. Their objects, often depicting animals like stags and griffins, were not just aesthetically pleasing, but also served practical purposes. Who wouldn't want a golden drinking cup shaped like a ram's head? But wait, there's more. The Scythians weren't just traders and crafters. They were also savvy negotiators. They knew how to make a deal, and more importantly, how to break one if it didn't serve their interests. Their alliances were as fluid as the steppes' rivers, and they could switch sides faster than you can say diplomatic recalibration. This flexibility kept them in the game for centuries, outmaneuvering larger empires and maintaining their independence in a world where such a feat was no small achievement. Now let's tackle the elephant, or should I say the horse, in the room, the legendary Scythian warriors. Yes, they fought, and yes, they were good at it. But the image of them as a band of wild marauders is, to put it mildly, a bit exaggerated. Sure, they had their skirmishes and battles, but they were also deeply involved in trade and diplomacy. The fact that they could switch from bartering goods to brandishing weapons, the drop of a hat speaks volumes about their adaptability. Their battle tactics were innovative, relying on mobility and surprise over sheer force. They were the ancient world's equivalent of a guerrilla force, using their knowledge of the terrain to outsmart more cumbersome armies. The Scythians also had a complex social structure that was as layered as their intricate jewelry. They were led by chieftains, and their society was organized into tribes, each with its own leader and territory. This decentralized structure might sound chaotic, but it gave them the flexibility to respond quickly to threats and opportunities. Power was often consolidated through marriages and alliances, ensuring that the Scythians were always in the loop, politically speaking. Interestingly, the Scythians were also known for their burial practices, which were as elaborate as their lifestyle. They believed in an afterlife where warriors could continue their conquests and enjoy their wealth. Their burial mounds, known as kurgans, were filled with treasures, weapons, and sometimes even sacrificed horses, all intended to accompany the deceased on their journey to the next world. These tombs are a testament to their beliefs and their view of the world beyond, and they're a treasure trove for archaeologists today. So, while the Scythians have often been overshadowed by their more famous neighbors like the Persians and Greeks, they were undoubtedly key players in the ancient world. They bridged east and west, connecting cultures and economies in ways that have left a lasting legacy. As we uncover more about their lives and their trade routes, we find a people who were much more than the sum of their parts, a society that thrived on its ability to adapt, trade, and when necessary, fight its way through history. As we continue to dig into their story, it's clear that the Scythians were truly the rock stars of the ancient trade scene, proving that sometimes the real stars of history aren't the ones with the biggest armies, but the ones with the smartest strategies. And so, with the Scythians straddling their horses, armed with fierce cunning and a knack for diplomacy, they found themselves at the heart of a trade network that would make any Wall Street broker green with envy. Let's dive into the spaghetti junction of trade routes that they navigated like pros. Picture the steppe as a massive, windswept superhighway with no speed limits and plenty of tolls, bandits, natural disasters, and rival tribes. These routes weren't just the ancient Silk Road's less glamorous cousin. They were the veins through which the lifeblood of the Scythians' economy flowed. Now, let's talk logistics. How did these nomads manage to keep goods flowing across thousands of kilometers without the luxury of a GPS or even a reliable map? The Scythians were the original logistics wizards, and their secret weapon was none other than the trusty horse. Think of them as the FedEx of the ancient world, except their next-day delivery could stretch into weeks or even months, depending on the weather and the state of international relations. But hey, when you're traversing the Eurasian steppe, a few delays are to be expected. The Scythians' trade routes connected them with a host of ancient powerhouses. To the west, the Greeks were eager buyers of Scythian grain, honey and furs, an ancient shopping list that would make any hipster's heart flutter. In exchange, the Scythians got their hands on Greek wine, olive oil, and ceramics, adding a touch of Mediterranean flair to their otherwise rugged existence. Meanwhile, to the south, the Persians offered textiles and luxury goods. They say you can't put a price on luxury, but the Scythians were more than happy to negotiate. And then there was the Far East connection, the Chinese, who were more than a hop, skip, and a jump away. The Scythians traded horses and furs for Chinese silk and precious stones. You could say they were the original trendsetters, introducing silk to Europe long before it became synonymous with high fashion. Fun fact, a single roll of silk could fetch a price equivalent to a horse. That's right, luxury had its price, and it was measured in horsepower. But let's not romanticize this too much. It wasn't all lavish exchanges and merry trading caravans. The Scythians faced challenges that would make any modern supply chain manager break out in a cold sweat. Bandits were an ever-present threat, lurking on the fringes of the steppe, ready to relieve hapless traders of their hard-earned goods. And let's not forget the logistical nightmares posed by the natural landscape itself. The steppe was a fickle mistress, with its harsh winters and scorching summers, and it took a seasoned traveler to navigate her moods. Despite these challenges, the Scythians thrived, thanks in no small part to their adaptability. They were masters of improvisation, often forming alliances with local tribes to safeguard their routes. These alliances were as stable as a house of cards in a windstorm, but they were just what the Scythians needed to keep their goods flowing. It wasn't just about trading goods, it was about trading favors, forming connections, and knowing when to cut your losses. This brings us to another myth that needs a good debunking, the notion that the Scythians were just a bunch of wild warriors with no head for business. In reality, they were shrewd negotiators with a keen eye for opportunity. They knew that in the game of trade, sometimes you had to play the long game, even if it meant taking a loss in the short term. It's a lesson that would resonate with any modern entrepreneur. Economically speaking, the Scythians were sitting pretty. Their control of trade routes meant they could levy taxes and tolls on goods passing through their territory, filling their coffers with gold and silver. And let's talk about that gold. It wasn't just for show. The Scythians used it to solidify their power, paying off allies and keeping rivals at bay. It was the ancient version of cash flow management, and the Scythians excelled at it. Politics, of course, played a significant role in their trade endeavors. The Scythians were acutely aware of the geopolitical landscape and were adept at playing one power against another. Their diplomatic maneuvers were as intricate as their gold jewelry, and they used them to maintain independence from their more powerful neighbors. They understood that in the world of international trade, it wasn't just about what you knew, but who you knew, and how you could manipulate those relationships to your advantage. But let's not pretend the Scythians were infallible. Like any society, they had their fair share of blunders. There were times when diplomatic relations soured, and trade routes were abruptly cut off. These setbacks were often the result of overzealous expansion, or simply being caught in the crossfire of larger empires. Yet the Scythians' resilience was legendary. They had an uncanny ability to bounce back, adapt, and forge new paths, a testament to their resourcefulness. So, if you ever find yourself daydreaming about the romantic allure of ancient trade and the enigmatic people who navigated it, remember this. The Scythians were far more than just fierce warriors and masterful traders. They were a testament to the power of adaptability, proving that even in an ever-changing world, those who can adjust, innovate, and seize opportunity can thrive, even in the most unlikely of landscapes. In the grand tapestry of history, the Scythians remind us that the best trade routes aren't just the ones that connect places. They are the ones that connect people, ideas, and cultures in ways that continue to shape the world today. It's a testament to the Scythians' adaptability that their trade networks didn't just survive. They flourished, leaving an indelible mark on the economic landscape of their time. Let's get under the hood of this ancient economic engine and see just how these nomadic traders turned the Eurasian steppe into a bustling marketplace. First off, let's talk grain. This wasn't just a staple food. It was the oil that kept the wheels of ancient commerce turning. The Scythians, with their vast fields stretching across modern-day Ukraine, were the breadbasket of the ancient world. Grain was to the Scythians what tech stocks are to modern investors, a commodity everyone wanted a piece of. By the 4th century BCE, they were exporting thousands of tons of grain to the Greeks, who were all too happy to trade their wine and olive oil for a slice of that carbohydrate pie. And boy, did it pay off. The Greek historian Herodotus noted that the Scythians were rolling in grain, and as we all know, when the historians start taking notes, you're doing something right. Now, let's talk luxury. Scythian furs, think sable, ermine, and fox, were the ancient equivalent of high fashion, the kind of thing that would make any self-respecting aristocrat swoon. These furs traveled far and wide, reaching as far as the Persian and Chinese markets. It's hard to imagine today, but these luxurious pelts were worth their weight in, well, gold. Speaking of which, their trade in precious metals wasn't just about hoarding shiny objects. Gold and silver weren't just currency. They were political tools, used to grease the wheels of diplomacy and keep those pesky rival tribes at bay. Let's not gloss over the role of the Scythians in spreading silk. They were among the first to introduce this exotic fabric to the Greeks and Romans, sparking a fashion revolution that would stretch across millennia. Silk was the status symbol of the day, a textile so prized that owning it was akin to having a blue checkmark on your social media profile today. How did this come about? Well, the Scythians acted as middlemen in the silk trade between China and Europe, and for good reason. They were perfectly positioned along the nascent Silk Road, the ancient trade superhighway that brought the East and West together in a tapestry of commerce and culture. Now, with all this talk of trade, you'd be forgiven for thinking the Scythians were just running a medieval shopping channel. But here's the kicker. Their economic strategy was as much about survival as it was about profit. The Scythians weren't just trading to get rich. They were trading to stay relevant, to keep their society vibrant and independent in a world of empires ready to swallow them whole. To understand the true impact of Scythian trade, we need to look at the ripple effect it had on neighboring civilizations. Take the Greeks, for example. The influx of Scythian grain allowed Greek city-states to flourish, feeding populations that would otherwise have been vulnerable to famine. This surplus of food freed up Greek citizens to pursue other endeavors, from philosophy and art to politics and science. In a way, the Scythians were unwitting patrons of the cultural blossoming that was classical Greece. And then there's the economic boost they gave the Persian Empire. By supplying luxury goods like furs and gold, the Scythians helped fuel the Persian appetite for wealth and opulence, which in turn drove their own expansionist ambitions. It was a cycle of trade and consumption that would have long-lasting effects on the region's geopolitical landscape. Of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing. The Scythians were caught in the crossfire of larger empires, their trade routes vulnerable to the ever-shifting sands of political alliances. They had to navigate this treacherous terrain with the same skill they showed on the battlefield, constantly renegotiating their place in the pecking order of ancient power politics. But let's not paint them as paragons of virtue. The Scythians were shrewd, sometimes ruthless in their dealings. They knew when to play nice and when to play hardball, and they weren't above using force to protect their interests. Their trading prowess went hand in hand with a reputation for brutality, a duality that both fascinated and terrified their contemporaries. In essence, the Scythians' economic impact was profound, touching everything from the agricultural output of the Greeks to the luxury markets of Persia and China. They were the connectors of their time, the conduits through which goods, ideas, and wealth flowed, shaping civilizations in ways that still echo through history. So, the next time you hear about the Scythians, remember they are more than just the tattooed warriors of ancient lore. They were pioneers of trade, wielding economic influence with the same deftness as they did their weapons. While their story may be a tapestry of contradictions, brutal yet diplomatic, nomadic yet economically savvy, it's a testament to their enduring legacy as one of history's great economic powerhouses. So, as the Scythians galloped across the steppe, economic powerhouses with a penchant for gold and a flair for trade, they were also weaving a delicate tapestry of political and social dynamics that would put any modern diplomat to shame. Forget the United Nations. These guys were running their own geopolitical game on horseback. First up, let's address the grand dance of alliances. The Scythians were the ultimate frenemies of the ancient world. They had alliances as tangled as a bowl of spaghetti. One minute they were shaking hands with the Greeks, the next they were side-eyeing the Persians. It was a constant balancing act, like juggling flaming torches while riding a unicycle. They had to keep everyone happy, or at least keep everyone from wanting to invade their territory. And let's be real, given their track record with the Greeks, Persians, and even the nomadic Sarmatians, it's a wonder they didn't wind up in ancient history's version of a barroom brawl every other week. The Scythians were also quite the cultural magpies, picking up influences from their trading partners like a fashionista at a sample sale. They borrowed art styles, religious practices, and even clothing, creating a vibrant cultural mosaic. This cultural exchange wasn't just about pretty trinkets, though. It was about displaying power and sophistication, showing their trading partners that they were as cultured as they were fierce. Their art, those intricate gold pieces and lavish burial treasures, was a testament to this hybrid identity. A Scythian chieftain could drink from a Greek-style rhyton and then use it to clobber a rival, blending elegance and ferocity in one fell swoop. Let's not gloss over the less glamorous side of these interactions. The Scythians could be as ruthless as Game of Thrones' most notorious schemers. When diplomacy didn't cut it, they weren't above using a bit of muscle to get what they wanted. Their infamous raids into the Persian Empire are a case in point. After initially cozying up to the Persians, they decided the best way to ensure good trade terms was to remind everyone who was boss by launching a few strategic raids. It's like when your neighbor borrows your lawnmower, and you remind them who owns it by leaving a note on their door, except with more arrows and fewer passive-aggressive post-its. When it came to managing their role as intermediaries, the Scythians were shrewd operators. They understood the value of information and were the ancient world's version of the savvy brokers, trading not just goods, but also knowledge. They knew who was trading what, where, and with whom. This intelligence gave them a leg up in negotiations, allowing them to play their partners off against each other. If the Greeks were getting too cozy with the Persians, the Scythians might just casually mention some choice tidbits they overheard about Persian troop movements. Information was power, and the Scythians wielded it like the sharpest of their swords. But let's not forget the social dynamics at play. The Scythians were a society with a social hierarchy as complex as a soap opera family tree. The chieftains ruled with the support of an elite warrior class, whose loyalty was bought with the spoils of trade and conquest. Below them were the artisans and herders, who kept the economy ticking over with their craftsmanship and livestock. This social structure was flexible enough to allow for mobility, yet stable enough to prevent the kind of power struggles that could tear the society apart. It was a system that ensured everyone had a stake in the success of their trade networks. Their society also had a surprisingly progressive approach to gender roles. Well, for the time, anyway. Scythian women weren't just sitting around weaving or tending to the kids. They were warriors, traders, and leaders in their own right. Herodotus even tells tales of female warriors who fought alongside the men, and archaeological evidence backs up these claims. Women were buried with weapons, often in positions of honor, suggesting they played a significant role in both warfare and trade. It's like discovering that your mild-mannered librarian moonlights as a rock star, unexpected but utterly fascinating. Despite their military prowess, the Scythians knew that raw power wasn't enough to maintain their dominance. They needed to be as skilled at diplomacy as they were at warfare. Take their interactions with the Greeks, for example. The Scythians provided grain and furs, while the Greeks offered wine, olive oil, and the occasional amphora of fine ceramics. This wasn't just a trade of goods, it was a trade of cultures. The Greeks wrote about the Scythians in their histories, sometimes as noble savages, sometimes as uncouth barbarians. But they respected them enough to engage in trade, and that respect was mutual. On the other hand, the Persians were a different kettle of fish. The Scythians' relationship with them was more like a game of chess, with each side trying to outmaneuver the other. The Scythians' raids into Persian territory were less about conquest and more about sending a message. We may trade with you, but don't think for a second that we're pushovers. This delicate balance of power kept tensions simmering without boiling over, allowing trade to continue even amidst political tension. Now, don't get me wrong, the Scythians weren't saints. They had their share of internal conflict, too. Tribal rivalries could flare up faster than a Twitter feud, and maintaining unity required a deft touch. Chieftains had to be both warriors and negotiators, capable of leading in battle and maintaining peace among their own people. It was a high-wire act that required constant vigilance and a knack for compromise. We delve further into the Scythians' political and social landscape. It's clear that they were more than just warriors or traders. They were masterful diplomats, skilled negotiators, and cultural chameleons, adapting to and shaping the world around them. Their story isn't just about trade routes and battlefields. It's about a society that thrived on its ability to navigate the complex web of alliances, conflicts, and cultural exchanges that defined their era. And so, as we wrap up this chapter of our Scythian saga, keep in mind that the next time you hear someone dismiss them as mere nomadic raiders, you'll know there's a lot more to these fierce horsemen than meets the eye. Their legacy is one of adaptability, resilience, and a keen sense of the world's intricate dance, a dance that they performed with the grace of a ballerina and the ferocity of a warrior. As we move towards the final part of this journey, we'll uncover even more about how these ancient influencers left their indelible mark on history. Stay tuned, because the Scythian story is far from over. And so, as we peel back the layers on the Scythians' storied past, let's start unraveling the myth from the reality. Picture those windswept steppes, where the Scythians rode with a blend of ferocity and finesse. It's tempting to romanticize their tale as one of endless adventure and unbridled freedom. Who wouldn't want to imagine themselves as a nomadic trader, galloping across the steppe with the wind in their hair, gold in their saddlebags, and a horizon full of possibilities? But the reality was less a Hollywood epic and more a gritty survival drama, with the steppe as both ally and adversary. Let's tackle the myth of the invincible Scythian trade machine. Sure, they orchestrated a trade network that was the envy of the ancient world, but it was a precarious operation. Their routes stretched over 500 kilometers from the Black Sea to the borders of China. That's like driving from New York to Miami, but without pit stops or roadside assistance. And instead of gridlock, you had roving bandits, rival tribes, and the occasional diplomatic spat to navigate. Sounds fun, right? The Scythians were as much at the mercy of the elements as any nomad. The Eurasian steppe is notorious for its unpredictable weather, where a sunny day could turn into a blizzard faster than you can say climate change. These were not minor inconveniences. A harsh winter could decimate a herd and wipe out a tribe's wealth overnight. And don't forget the logistics nightmare of moving goods across such vast distances. It wasn't just about having enough horses. It was about timing, strategy, and sometimes a little luck. Now, about those horses. They were the unsung heroes of the Scythian story. These animals were bred for endurance, capable of covering 30 kilometers a day with ease. But even they had limits. A sick horse could halt a caravan in its tracks, and losing just a few could spell disaster for a trading mission. The Scythians had to be expert veterinarians as well as traders, ensuring their equine partners were in top shape for the grueling journeys ahead. Economically, the Scythians were playing a high-stakes game. Their wealth was tied up in their mobility. That also meant their fortunes could evaporate as quickly as morning mist. A bad trade deal, a failed harvest, or a diplomatic misstep could plunge them into crisis. They thrived on adaptability, true, but they also lived on the edge, constantly recalibrating their strategies to stay afloat. And then there's the small matter of their legendary gold. To outsiders, the Scythians appeared to have an endless supply of the stuff, with their opulent jewelry and lavish burial mounds. But gold was more than a status symbol. It was a tool of political leverage. They used it to curry favor, broker peace, and sometimes just to show off. Yet the romantic image of the Scythians as gold-rich nomads doesn't capture the full picture. Gold was scarce and precious, often gained through treacherous routes or hard-won battles. It wasn't so much a treasure chest as it was a currency of power and survival. Now, let's talk about the enduring legacy of these enigmatic traders. The Scythians might not have left monumental architecture, but they left an indelible mark on the civilizations they touched. Their trade routes laid the groundwork for what would become the Silk Road, the grand artery of commerce that connected the East and West for centuries. They were the original networkers, linking cultures and economies long before globalization was a buzzword. The Greeks might have penned their histories, but it was the Scythians who fed them, quite literally. Their grain exports fueled the growth of Greek city-states, enabling the cultural and intellectual flourishing of classical Greece. In doing so, they sowed the seeds for Western civilization. It's a delicious irony that a people often dismissed as barbarians were instrumental in nurturing one of history's most celebrated cultures. Meanwhile, the Scythians' interactions with the Persians and Chinese set the stage for cross-cultural exchanges that would shape empires. They were the conduits of silk, the middlemen who introduced this luxurious fabric to the West. In doing so, they sparked a fashion revolution and a trade network that would endure for centuries. Imagine a world without silk ties or scarves. Thank the Scythians for your sartorial elegance. But it wasn't just about goods. It was about ideas. The Scythians were cultural chameleons, absorbing and disseminating influences across borders. Their art, with its distinctive animal motifs, influenced styles far beyond their own territories. Their burial practices and social structures offered a glimpse into the ways nomadic societies could thrive in a world dominated by empires. In essence, the Scythians were a bridge, connecting disparate cultures and creating a mosaic of shared human experience. So, as we wrap up our journey into the world of the Scythians, let's raise a golden cup, perhaps shaped like a ram's head, to these formidable traders of the steppe. They were more than the sum of their myths, more than just fierce warriors or shrewd merchants. They were architects of a legacy that transcended their time, proving that sometimes the most enduring impact comes not from what you build, but from the paths you forge. In the grand tapestry of history, the Scythians remind us that it's the connections we make, the routes we navigate, and the stories we share that leave the most lasting mark. Now, go on. Impress your friends with your newfound knowledge of the Scythians, the original rock stars of the trade world. In the bustling streets of Alexandria, where the air was as thick with ideas as it was with the scent of spices, Hypatia was born into a world crackling with intellectual electricity. Think of Alexandria as the ancient world's answer to Silicon Valley, but instead of tech startups, it was brimming with brilliant minds debating philosophy, mathematics, and the occasional scandalous affair. It was the kind of place where your neighbor might be a philosopher, your barrister a mathematician, and your fishmonger a dabbling astronomer. Hypatia's father, Theon, was one of these cerebral jugglers, a mathematician and philosopher who spent his days noodling over numbers and stars. If there was a historical equivalent of a stage dad, Theon was it. He was determined to ensure Hypatia wasn't just another name in the scrolls of history, but a force to be reckoned with. You could say she was homeschooled, but in a time when that meant hanging out at the Library of Alexandria, the largest repository of knowledge in the ancient world, it was less sitting in pajamas and more rubbing elbows with the intellectual elite. Now, about this library, it wasn't just a place where scrolls went to gather dust. Picture a sprawling complex where the greatest minds of the era gathered to swap theories and occasionally throw shade at each other's work. It housed over 500,000 documents, a staggering feat given the time it took to hand copy each one on papyrus. The library was the Harvard of its day, but with more toga parties and less student debt. Under Theon's tutelage, Hypatia became something of a prodigy. She wasn't just dipping her toes into the intellectual waters, she was doing cannonballs. Mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, you name it, she mastered it. Her education wasn't just about absorbing information, it was about challenging existing knowledge and contributing to it. Theon was known for his work on Euclid's Elements, a foundational text in math, and it wouldn't be a stretch to imagine Hypatia correcting him over breakfast, much to his chagrin. But let's not sugarcoat it. Being a woman in the ancient academic world was like trying to play chess without a queen. The odds were stacked against her, yet Hypatia didn't just play the game. She wrote new rules. Alexandria, while progressive for its time, was still a society that preferred its women to be seen and not heard, and certainly not teaching men about mathematics. Yet, Hypatia carved out her place, becoming one of the leading figures of the Neoplatonist school of philosophy. The fact that she did so without a single social media account is nothing short of miraculous. The city itself was a melting pot of cultures and ideas, founded by Alexander the Great in 331 BCE. By Hypatia's time, it had become a crossroads for commerce and knowledge, a place where Egyptian, Greek, Roman, and Jewish traditions intertwined in a cultural dance that was as beautiful as it was chaotic. It was a city that never slept, partly because the debates in the academies often stretched into the wee hours, fueled by equal parts passion and wine. In this vibrant environment, Hypatia didn't just thrive, she excelled. She taught at the Museum of Alexandria, an institution that functioned like a think tank, attracting scholars from across the Mediterranean. She was known for her engaging lectures and ability to demystify complex concepts. Students flocked to her like pilgrims to a shrine, eager to soak up her wisdom and perhaps a bit of her legendary charisma. Hypatia's rise wasn't just due to her intellect. It was her ability to communicate and connect ideas that set her apart. She was a true polymath, a term that in modern slang might translate to ultimate overachiever. Her work in astronomy included constructing astrolabes and hydrometers, instruments that, while now considered archaic, were cutting-edge technology at the time. If they had Nobel Prizes back then, her mantle would have been cluttered with them. However, let's not get lost in the romanticism of it all. The reality was much harsher. The political climate in Alexandria was like a powder keg with a very short fuse. Religious tensions were high as Christianity began to assert dominance over pagan traditions, and philosophy was increasingly seen as a suspicious activity. Hypatia's prominence made her a target in this volatile mix, but we'll get to the dramatic finale of her life in due time. For now, let's bask in the brilliance of her early years, a time when a young woman in a male-dominated world defied expectations and soared to intellectual heights that few dared to dream of. Hypatia's story is not just about one woman's achievements, but a testament to the indomitable human spirit, the relentless pursuit of knowledge in a world that often prefers ignorance. As we delve deeper into her life, remember that every scroll she touched, every formula she devised, was a step towards the enlightenment of not just her own mind, but the collective consciousness of humankind. Talk about a tough act to follow, right? Hypatia's early years didn't just set the stage. They built a whole amphitheater for her to perform on. With her intellectual acrobatics already making waves, it's time to delve into her greatest hits in mathematics and astronomy. We're talking about contributions that didn't just add footnotes to history books. They filled entire chapters. First up, Diophantus's Arithmetica ***. If math texts had rock star status, this work would be the equivalent of a platinum album. It was a collection of algebraic problems and solutions that was as much a brain teaser as it was a guide. Now, when Hypatia got her hands on it, she did what any top-tier academic would do. She improved it. Her commentaries on Diophantus's work were like a mathematical remix, offering clarity and new insights where there was previously only perplexity. She took algebra, a subject that makes many modern students groan, and transformed it into something that could dazzle even the most hardened critics of numbers. But let's not kid ourselves. Hypatia's academic journey wasn't all roses and laurels. She was navigating a labyrinth of gender politics that would make even the Minotaur pause. Ancient academia wasn't exactly an equal opportunity employer. Picture a meeting room where the only thing thicker than the scrolls on the table was the layer of testosterone in the air. Yet Hypatia didn't just walk into these rooms. She owned them. Her intellect demanded respect, and respect she got, albeit with a side of skepticism and a dash of envy from her male counterparts. Then there's her work on Ptolemy's Almagest asterisk, an astronomical opus that charted the stars long before Galileo turned his telescope skyward. Hypatia's contributions here were nothing short of celestial. She helped make the complex, eye-crossing calculations of planetary motions accessible. Imagine trying to explain quantum physics to your dog. That's the level of challenge she faced in making these concepts understandable. Yet she did it with aplomb, turning the cosmic chaos into a comprehensible cosmos. As if unraveling the mysteries of the universe wasn't enough, Hypatia also held the reins of the Neoplatonic school in Alexandria. This wasn't just any school. It was the intellectual epicenter for those who pondered the nature of reality and the soul while sipping on watered-down wine. As head of the school, she was more than a teacher. She was the oracle of philosophy, guiding her students through the labyrinth of metaphysical thought. One of her most notable disciples was Synesius of Cyrene, a man who would go on to become a bishop. Talk about diversifying your portfolio. But let's not gloss over the absurdities of her situation. Hypatia might have been leading philosophical discussions that would make Aristotle proud, but she was still doing it in a world where her gender was seen as an anomaly. The fact that she had students eager to learn from her, regardless of her gender, was a testament to her charisma and intellect. Yet, the societal constraints she faced were no laughing matter. Imagine being a woman in her position and having to navigate the philosophical equivalent of a boys' club. The irony is as thick as the walls of the Library of Alexandria. Despite the challenges, Hypatia didn't just survive, she thrived. Her work on astrolabes and hydrometers was groundbreaking, paving the way for future innovations. She was creating tools that allowed humanity to measure the heavens and the seas, essentially giving us our first glimpses of the universe's vastness. If she were alive today, she'd probably be designing apps to map the stars or developing algorithms to solve global problems. Yet, it's crucial not to get swept away in the romanticism of her achievements. We must remember the economic and political realities she faced. Alexandria was a city teetering on the edge of religious upheaval and economic uncertainty. As Christianity began to rise, old pagan traditions, including the philosophical ones Hypatia championed, were increasingly under threat. This tension was not just an abstract backdrop, it was the very air she breathed. In this climate, her role was not just that of a teacher or philosopher, but of a cultural icon standing at the crossroads of tradition and change. Her life was a testament to the power of knowledge and the courage it takes to wield it in a world that often prefers the comfort of ignorance. So, as we wrap up this chapter on Hypatia's achievements in mathematics and astronomy, let's take a moment to appreciate the enormity of her contributions. She wasn't just a scholar. She was a trailblazer, a beacon of intellectual light in a world that could be as dark as the night sky she charted. And while she may not have had a Twitter account to broadcast her brilliance, her legacy continues to shine through the ages, a testament to the indomitable spirit of a woman who refused to be confined by the narrow-mindedness of her time. In the next part, we'll delve deeper into the political and social dynamics that shaped her life and ultimately her untimely demise. But for now, let's bask in the glow of her achievements, a light that continues to guide us through the corridors of history. So, as we pause to appreciate Hypatia's luminous contributions, let's swivel our focus to her philosophical prowess. Hypatia wasn't just crunching numbers and charting stars. She was also delving into the murky depths of the human condition and the mysteries of existence. Enter Neoplatonism, the philosophical school that was the intellectual equivalent of a high-wire act. Complex, daring, and with the potential for both enlightenment and disaster. Neoplatonism, for the uninitiated, was like the greatest hits album of ancient philosophy. It took Plato's ideas and remixed them with a dash of mysticism, aiming to bridge the gap between the mortal and the divine. Hypatia, as the head of the Neoplatonic school in Alexandria, wasn't just playing the hits, she was composing new symphonies. Her lectures were legendary, drawing audiences that would make modern TED talks look like intimate gatherings. Students, scholars, and the philosophically curious flocked to her sessions, eager to unravel the cosmic questions of existence. Her role as a public intellectual was akin to being a rock star philosopher. And let's not sugarcoat it, that kind of fame was a double-edged sword. On the one hand, she was revered for her wisdom and insight, her lectures a heady cocktail of logic and metaphysical musings. But on the other, her prominence in a male-dominated sphere was a glaring target for envy and resentment. Hypatia was like the David Bowie of her time, brilliant, boundary-pushing, and not universally loved for it. The intersection of science, religion, and politics was a dance as intricate as any philosophical debate. Alexandria was a city simmering with religious tension, where old pagan traditions were being nudged aside by the rising tide of Christianity. In this volatile environment, Hypatia's allegiance to the old ways of philosophical inquiry was seen by some as an act of defiance. She was a beacon of pagan intellectualism in a world increasingly bathed in Christian orthodoxy. Now, why did this matter? Because Hypatia's work wasn't happening in a vacuum. Her teachings on Neoplatonism were more than abstract theories. They were a form of cultural resistance. They represented a worldview that valued inquiry and the pursuit of knowledge over dogma and blind faith. In a place like Alexandria, where knowledge was as much a currency as gold, this was a big deal. Let's put it in economic terms. Imagine a stock market where the commodities are ideas. Hypatia was both a broker and a commodity herself, trading in concepts that had the power to shape societies. Her influence extended beyond the lecture halls, affecting the political and religious currents of the time. She was like a philosophical influencer, minus the Instagram account. But here's where the myth-busting comes in. While it's tempting to romanticize Hypatia as a lone beacon of reason in a sea of ignorance, the truth is more nuanced. She was part of an intellectual tradition that was struggling to maintain its foothold in a rapidly changing world. The allure of her story lies in its complexity. She was both a product of her time and a force that sought to transcend it. Her public persona was as carefully constructed as any modern celebrity's. Hypatia wasn't just a philosopher. She was a performer of ideas, captivating her audiences with a blend of charisma and intellect. Her lectures were not dry recitations of doctrine, but lively exchanges that challenged her students to think deeply and question everything, including her teachings. This was a time when the divide between science, religion, and politics wasn't as neatly defined as it is today. Hypatia navigated these waters with the skill of a seasoned sailor, aware that each tide could bring both opportunity and danger. Her philosophical inquiries were as much about understanding the natural world as they were about exploring the divine. In a world where political alliances could shift as quickly as the desert sands, her intellectual pursuits were a form of political resistance. Yet, the harsh reality of her situation cannot be ignored. Her prominence made her a target in a city where religious and political tensions were a constant undercurrent. The rise of Christianity brought with it a consolidation of power that was often at odds with the free exchange of ideas that Hypatia championed. She was a symbol of a past that some were eager to forget and others desperate to preserve. It's important to remember that Alexandria was not just an intellectual hub. It was a city of commerce and power. The economic realities of the time influenced every aspect of life, including the pursuit of knowledge. Hypatia's lectures were not just academic exercises. They were part of a broader struggle for cultural and political influence. Her ideas had the power to sway public opinion, and in a city like Alexandria, that was a currency more valuable than gold. Let's not forget the human element in all this. Hypatia's story is not just one of intellectual brilliance. It's a tale of courage and resilience in the face of adversity. She was a woman who dared to defy societal expectations, a thinker who challenged the status quo. Her legacy is a reminder that the pursuit of knowledge is a path fraught with peril, but also rich with possibility. As we delve deeper into her life, let's keep in mind the broader context of her world, a place where the lines between science, religion, and politics were as blurred as the scrolls in the library of Alexandria. Hypatia's story is a testament to the power of ideas and the courage it takes to stand by them in a world that often prefers the comfort of ignorance. So, as we wrap up this exploration of Hypatia's philosophical contributions, let's pause to consider the enormity of her impact. She wasn't just a scholar. She was a trailblazer, a beacon of intellectual light in a world that could be as dark as the night sky she charted. And while she may not have had a Twitter account to broadcast her brilliance, her legacy continues to shine through the ages, a testament to the indomitable spirit of a woman who refused to be confined by the narrow-mindedness of her time. In the next part, we'll explore the political and social dynamics that shaped her life and ultimately her untimely demise. But for now, let's bask in the glow of her achievements, a light that continues to guide us through the corridors of history. As we shift our gaze to Alexandria's socio-political climate during Hypatia's later years, let's not mince words. This was a city on the brink. Air crackled not just with intellectual debate, but with tension so thick you could cut it with a knife, or, in this case, a scroll. The rise of Christianity was shifting the sands beneath Alexandria's feet, and the decline of paganism wasn't just a trend. It was a tectonic shift in not only religious, but also political and social landscapes. By the time Hypatia reached the zenith of her influence, Alexandria was a powder keg, and everyone was fumbling for matches. The city was no longer the cosmopolitan hub founded by Alexander the Great, where cultures mingled like guests at an international soiree. Instead, it had become a battleground for religious supremacy, where the old guards were being ushered out like unwelcome party crashers at a now Christian gathering. So, what does this mean for Hypatia? Picture her as a lighthouse in a storm, steadfast against the rising tide of Christian orthodoxy. Her allegiance to Neoplatonism and the classical traditions made her as much a symbol of resistance as an intellectual powerhouse. And that's where the trouble began. Enter Cyril of Alexandria, the city's bishop, and a man whose ambitions were as grand as his religious fervor. Think of him as the CEO of Christianity Incorporated, determined to corner the market on faith and doctrine. By 412 AD, Cyril had risen to power, and his influence was growing faster than a rumor at a family reunion. He was a man on a mission, and that mission involved consolidating Christian power while reducing pagan influence to rubble. Hypatia found herself smack dab in the middle of this cultural maelstrom. Her popularity and her association with Orsts, the Roman prefect of Alexandria, didn't exactly win her any points with Cyril. Orsts was a supporter of religious tolerance and an admirer of Hypatia's intellect, a real Renaissance man before the Renaissance was even a thing. The alliance between Orsts and Hypatia was a thorn in Cyril's side, and in a city where political alliances were as fragile as papyrus, that was a dangerous position to be in. Now, let's talk economics, because as always, money mattered. Alexandria's wealth was tied to its status as a major trade hub. The city's prosperity bankrolled everything from public works to philosophical pursuits. But as Christianity began to dominate, funds that once supported diverse intellectual endeavors were increasingly funneled into building churches and maintaining ecclesiastical power. This economic shift wasn't just a change in financial priorities. It signaled a broader cultural transformation that left little room for the likes of Hypatia. Here's where the myth-busting comes in. The romantic narrative paints Hypatia as a lone martyr for science slaughtered by a mob of ignorant zealots. The truth? Well, it's more of a tangled web of misinformation, political power plays, and good old-fashioned scapegoating. See, Hypatia wasn't a solitary figure defending the fortress of knowledge against the barbarian hordes. She was part of a broader intellectual tradition that was being systematically dismantled by the rising Christian orthodoxy. In March 415 AD, tensions reached a boiling point. A rumor, as baseless as it was inflammatory, spread like wildfire. Hypatia was accused of using her mystical pagan powers to turn Orsts against Cyril. Talk about a plot twist straight out of a bad soap opera. The rumor was nothing more than political slander, but in a city on edge, It was enough to ignite the fuse. Hypatia's death was as brutal as it was tragic. She was attacked by a mob, reportedly led by a group of Christian zealots known as the Parabolani. Think of them as the medieval version of a militant religious order. They dragged her from her chariot, stripped her of her clothes, and murdered her in a manner that was as grotesque as it was symbolic. This wasn't just a murder. It was a public statement, a grim declaration that the old ways were not just out of favor, but dangerous to espouse. The aftermath of Hypatia's murder was a watershed moment for Alexandria, and for intellectual freedom as a whole. Her death marked the decline of Alexandria as a center of learning, and the rise of religious dogma as the dominant force. It was as if a veil had been drawn over the city, obscuring the light of inquiry, and casting a long shadow over the future of philosophical and scientific exploration. Yet, let's not romanticize her as a martyr for science alone. Her life and death were emblematic of the broader struggle between the forces of tradition and change, a battle that continues to echo down the corridors of history. Hypatia's story is a reminder that the pursuit of knowledge is often fraught with peril, that intellectual freedom is a fragile thing, easily snuffed out by the tides of ignorance and intolerance. In this tale of power and betrayal, misinformation was the weapon of choice, and Hypatia was its unfortunate victim. Her tragic end was not just a loss for the world of ancient scholarship, but a cautionary tale about the dangers of dogma and the importance of preserving the freedom to think and question. As we draw this chapter to a close, let's reflect on the broader context of Hypatia's life and death. She was not just a scholar, but a symbol, a beacon of intellectual light in a world increasingly shrouded in darkness. And while her story may have ended in tragedy, her legacy endures, a testament to the indomitable spirit of inquiry that refuses to be silenced. In our next installment, we'll delve deeper into the repercussions of her death, exploring how her legacy influenced the course of history and shaped the intellectual landscape of the centuries to come. But for now, let's hold on to the memory of Hypatia, a woman who dared to stand against the tide and paid the ultimate price for her courage. Hypatia's life may have ended in a blaze of tragedy, but her legacy, now that's where the plot thickens. She didn't just fade into obscurity, her name relegated to dusty scrolls and forgotten parchments. Nope, she became a symbol, a rallying cry for knowledge and tolerance, a cautionary tale of what happens when ignorance and extremism get the upper hand. Her story is the stuff of legend, a cross between a Greek tragedy and a modern-day protest anthem. So, what exactly is Hypatia's legacy? It's like an intellectual mixtape, echoing through the corridors of history and inspiring generations of thinkers, dreamers, and doers. Her contributions to science and philosophy are undeniable. Even if the specifics of her work were lost in the sands of time, the spirit of inquiry she embodied remains a guiding star. In the realm of mathematics, she was a trailblazer, and her commentaries on works like Diophantus's *Arithmetica* and Ptolemy's *Almagest* were foundational, influencing scholars who would come centuries later. Fast forward to the Renaissance, an era that was basically a historical remix of ancient Greek and Roman achievements. Hypatia's name resurfaced, sparkling like a gem among the intellectual elite. Her life became a beacon for those advocating for the revival of classical knowledge, a reminder that the pursuit of wisdom is a noble endeavor, even if it sometimes comes with a side of controversy and danger. Figures like Galileo and Copernicus, who dared to challenge the orthodoxy of their time, were walking in her intellectual footsteps, consciously or not. But it's not just the dusty pages of history where Hypatia shines. Her influence has seeped into modern media, transforming her into something of a pop culture icon. Movies, books, and even video games have taken her story and run with it, each adding their own artistic flair to her legend. Take the 2009 film *Agora*, for example, which casts Rachel Weisz as Hypatia. While the film takes liberties with historical accuracy, it captures the essence of her struggle, an intellectual powerhouse standing firm in the face of societal upheaval. Let's be real, though. Hollywood loves to glamorize and simplify, turning complex lives into neat narratives, and Hypatia's story is no exception. The romantic appeal of her as a lone intellectual warrior battling against the forces of darkness is irresistible, but the truth is messier and more nuanced. She wasn't the solitary torchbearer of truth. She was part of a broader intellectual tradition that was being systematically dismantled. Her murder was not just a tragic end for a brilliant mind, but a reflection of the turbulent times she lived in, a society grappling with changing ideologies and power dynamics. In today's world, Hypatia's story resonates more than ever. The rise of misinformation, the polarization of beliefs, and the struggle for intellectual freedom are as relevant now as they were in her time. Her life serves as a stark reminder of the dangers posed by ignorance and extremism, and the need to protect the sanctity of knowledge and the freedom to question. In an age where information is abundant, but wisdom seems scarce, Hypatia's legacy is a call to action, a reminder to seek truth, challenge dogma, and never settle for easy answers. Economically speaking, the decline of Alexandria as a cultural and intellectual hub is a cautionary tale in itself. When power and resources shifted from supporting diverse intellectual pursuits to consolidating religious authority, the city lost its status as a beacon of learning. It's a stark illustration of how economic priorities shape cultural landscapes, and a reminder that the pursuit of knowledge often depends on the whims of those in power. In the end, Hypatia's story is not just about one woman's achievements. It's about the eternal struggle between enlightenment and ignorance, progress and regression. Her life and untimely death are a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of ideas. Her legacy continues to inspire those who dare to stand against the tide, to ask questions, and to seek answers, even when the world seems determined to silence them. So, as we wrap up this exploration of Hypatia's life and legacy, let's take a moment to appreciate the full spectrum of her influence. She was not just a scholar, but a symbol, a testament to the enduring power of the human intellect and the courage it takes to wield it in a world that often prefers the comfort of ignorance. Her story is a reminder that while the pursuit of knowledge can be fraught with peril, it is also rich with possibility. And that, my friends, is a legacy worth preserving.